to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. I have returned from my vacation. Joining me, the usual crew that has been holding down the fort. We've got Josh Torres,
We held down the fort.
Adam Vitale,
Hello.
James Glazio,
Hey, folks.
and Chao Minwoo.
Hello.
Yep, and May has been a very interesting month. 2 weeks ago, I was out of town for a wedding. Last week, I was out of town for a camping trip. I'm in town this week. I have been, online still, so I've seen all the discussion, both on this podcast and in the gaming sphere at large. Some news good, some news not so great. We'll go into the details of what's relevant to our site here in this podcast. And of course, once again, thank you to Josh, Adam, James, and Chow for holding down the fort for 2 weeks that I was out, talking about everything related to the Xbox studios. I'm trying to think of what else happened this week. All the indie announcements. We had Hades 2 Shadow drop into early access, which we're going to be talking about today, actually pretty early in this podcast.
We talked about a lot about fiscal year reports last week. It was great.
Oh yeah,
I did reports.
Yeah, well, RPG site, business journalists here. But no, being serious though, Adam always does a good job at paring this down, and obviously we all inflect our own kind of interpretations of the results, and we always try to make sure that we go to the primary source and we don't we go to the actual slides presented by the publishers from their results briefings and give it to you straight as we
Adam has strong feelings about primary sources. That's what I learned.
Adam, what's your strong feeling?
It's always fun when these Japanese, businesses give their presentations, and so we have to learn about what they say through a a language barrier, through a Twitter barrier. Then it's kind of fun
through the barrier, the bias of people who want to see or don't want to see certain results instead of just seeing it straight. So.
And
thank you guys.
People get so uptight about specific wording in English, and it's like, these were announced in Japanese, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's annoying.
I mean, just a very small example is when people saw the word extraordinary on that Square Enix.
Oh yeah.
That has a business definition.
Right. So of course we're about halfway through May somehow already. May has been a surprisingly packed month for smaller releases, niche releases, indie games, things like that. I know we were all kind of looking at May as kind of the backlog month, but it's been surprisingly packed. I have still been using it as a backlog month. I might talk about a few of the games that I was able to play in the gaps last couple of weeks. But as I teed up in the introduction here, one of the games that released, I don't think in the last week, but within the last couple of weeks, in the time I was out, was the shadow drop in early access of Hades 2. Now, early access has taken on so many multiple forms, especially over the last couple of years. It used to be a glorified demo, and then larger studios like Larian started to use it to extreme success. And then, of course, another studio that's been using it to success is Supergiant Games, and Hades 2 is no exception. And I am not familiar with Hades. I've not played the first game. I do know, of course, of its very sterling reputation. And then Hades 2 apparently has launched in early access technically, but with as much or more content than the final version of Hades 1. So basically in a very, very strong feature complete state. Maybe we'll go into it. I have not played it, so I will hand off the microphone to someone who has, and that is Josh. You've put in some time into Hades 2. Just tee us up into, for those that have and haven't played Hades 1, Hades 2, what does it bring to the table? What's new? What's the same? And what's your time with it been so far?
Yeah, so I thought it was gonna be a backlog month for me too, and then a lot of cool games came out all of a sudden this month, and I was like, my original plan for May was I'm gonna do a new playthrough of Elden Ring to get started to get.
I still want to do that.
I still want to do it
on my list.
We should do it like a seamless co-op or some shit. Just do it.
No. Don't do seamless co-op because then you won't be able to use the save at the DLC launch. You're gonna have to wait.
Is that how it is? Okay.
Yeah, because it adds in additional items into the game.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't fiddle with any of that. But yeah, so I played the original of Hades 1. Really loved it. A lot of people loved it. It was, I think, our game of the year or very close to game of the year that year. Um, and Hades 2 is kind of a remarkable evolution for Supergiant Games. As they've touted before, this is their first direct sequel to one of their games. Ever since Bastion, Pyre, um, what was the other one? I already forget.
Transistor.
Transistor, yes. So Hades 2 is, in a sense, yes, it is a lot more Hades in the sense that, like, yes, the systems and mechanics on surface level look the same. There's an isometric action RPG. You have your dash. You have your primary, your cast, your special attack. Very much like you would expect from the first Hades. You take control of a new main character named Melinoe or Noe. I forgot the way to pronounce her name.
Melinoe.
Yeah, Melinoe. And this is a direct sequel to Hades 1, but you don't necessarily need to have played Hades 1 to, like, still appreciate the story. She is related to a lot of the significant characters from the first Hades. She's the daughter of Hades, and
She's
the
Zagreus'
princess of the
sister.
Yes, yeah, the younger sister of Zagreus, which is the protagonist of Hades 1. And her primary objective in this one is to basically descend instead of like Zagreus trying to ascend from the underworld. She's going down, descending in this one to go combat Kronos, the Titan of Time, to kind of get back at what Kronos did to her family. And it's a whole. The storytelling is very much in the same structure as Hades 1 in the sense that, like, it is suited for like that multiple rogue-like structure of, like, hey, you're going at it, you fail, you resurrect back to like your home base called like the Crossroads, and more new events happen. You'll meet new characters, you'll come across like new gods to power up and modify like your weapons as you're going throughout your runs. You're collecting resources that you can use back at your home base to unlock more stuff. And this one, there's a little bit more of that aspect because, like, even in some like part of the runs, there'll be like resource nodes. Like, you need to have like actual like resource harvesting tools, like a pickaxe or a fishing rod. Well, you had the fishing rod in the first one, but other tools to like get resources in order to like harvest some stuff at the base. So like you may collect some seeds that like you buy an upgrade to now you can plant some seeds, and after a certain amount of runs they'll harvest, and then you'll get those resources, and you can use those resources for other systems. Like, it may be for unlocking functions, like, hey, you can now unlock a shop. Like, this was back in Hades 1 as well, where there were like shops, but this one there's like a cauldron back at the base where you put in these resources to unlock that shop function. One of the big new mechanics is like the tarot cards, where um before you go on a new run, you have this resource meter that's like at first a 10 out of 10, and then like you have resources to unlock new tarot cards that take up a certain amount of resources. Like, a tarot card might be like a 3 out of 10, and this tarot card makes it so that every time you go into a new location, you'll heal 2 health. But if you're under like 25%, you'll heal 4 health instead, and then that'll be like a persistent tarot card upgrade that you can bring with you from run to run because you unlock that tarot card, and then it'll allow you to like equip as many tarot cards as you want, as long as you are within that resource limitation that you can upgrade with another um, resource that you collect in between runs. And it does have that same learning process of Hades 1, where there'll be distinct unique looks for enemies, and the way that they attack are all different in their own ways. So a lot of the game is, once again, encountering these enemies, learning what they do, encountering these bosses, learning what they do, what their patterns are, and finding ways to adapt and like get more acquainted with like the gods and their upgrades to your weapons, and finding a style that will better prepare you for like the future challenges up ahead. On that, in this one, like, you have like since Melinoe is a witch, she has like a mana bar, so you can actually like hold down the square, the triangle, or the circle button you get a powered up version of that skill, and then that'll use mana. And then as you may think, they'll like when you channel these buttons, there'll be upgrades that'll like further enhance them and like alter their properties, and then they'll call that like the Omega cast or the Omega attack. So these like powered up button options and so forth, and they do. And it's not as predictable as you might think, based on like what you've seen in Hades 1. There are definitely some later like biomes, like the third and fourth one, where they start mixing it up. I won't like spoil how they do it, but I think they do some creative stuff with like the structure and the design of the levels and the way that you progress them. And it's like, oh, okay, they're starting to experiment more with this sort of this established formula that like what people expect, and then how they decide to switch it up to kind of be more thinking out of the box, so to speak.
Even in comparison to the first game, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Obviously, having not played the first game, I can only think of it in, like, generalities,
Right.
but I do like when a game establishes a set of rules,
Mhm.
like, either deliberately or just inferred, and then it goes and starts breaking them. That's, like, the best. Usually, that's a really good feeling. Sometimes it can happen in ways where you're like, "Wait, that's not how this game has ever worked up to this point. Why are you doing this now?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Mhm.
but it seems like in the way that Hades 2 accomplishes it, it kind of keeps things fresh, keeps things interesting. Is this tarot card system completely new, or is it refreshed from the first game?
It's new. I don't
Okay.
remember this kind of system, the first Hades, any equivalent to it. And then like in the first Hades though, like you unlock new weapons. Of course, in this one, since you have like resource gathering tools, you actually can unlock like new resource gathering tools, and then like you select one of those on top of like a primary weapon, and then like you'll encounter like specific nodes that you can use them in your runs to like go gather more of this resource if you need more of this resource, and you want to specialize in that. Like one will be like gathering a resource to expand like the resource meter that the tarot cards use. You can gather more of that resource to expand that faster, or you can like get the pickaxe and then you can gather more silver. And silver, getting more silver fast will allow you to unlock like new primary weapons faster. They'll need a sizable amount of silver along with the other secondary tools
So
needed.
is that whole
For that.
economy like brand new? Just having a resource system at all? You said the gathering tools are new, but like having
There
the
was there was some resource management like in that way in the first game, but not to this extent. This one really kind of doubles down on it, and I don't think it really gets in the way necessarily. It's not like I'm going to runs to go farm silver. I'm still doing runs with the intent of getting as far as I can. It doesn't really get in the way. Um, uh, I think it adds more of like a home base feel, if anything. If it makes you feel like, hey, I'm actually doing like a little like some light town building, as well. So in that sense, it does feel new because they've expanded more on it, and of course, like
so was there no town building in the first game?
not really. Like there were some things that they can like kind of like put here and there, and then your home base in the first one, but it was pretty. I'd say it was pretty fleshed out. Like it was only light touches that like you added onto it, here and I don't know exactly like what else they're gonna add to it because it all like you said, it's not like it doesn't feel like it's like super feature complete in the sense like, oh, there's like a like definitely the final vision of the game. There's definitely some parts that's like, oh, okay, I wonder how they're gonna expand more on this. And honestly, after like 6 hours of it, like there's still more new events and characters that I've like begun just meeting for the first time. Like I've maybe done like 7 to 8 runs so far, so I'm not too far in, and I'm still like unlocking like more new stuff to do in the game. But for the most part, like I've got a general sense of like, okay, this is kind of the flow of the game, and I'm really looking forward to like see what like the final end goal is. And of course, if it's like anything like Hades 1, just because you get to the final boss and beat the final boss doesn't necessarily mean that it might be the end of the story because they only got like the quote unquote real end of the first Hades game by like beating like several like a set amount of runs because of the way that the story is
I believe
structured
you had to beat it
in
10
that game.
times to get like
Yeah.
an epilogue ending.
hmm Yeah. So I wonder how they're gonna handle that aspect in this game. Honestly, I don't even know like how much of the story is like implemented in this game. And they're always tuning it. Like earlier this week, they had like their first major patch that made it so that like canceling into a dash was like a lot better. It felt a lot better, and that's already like in itself like a big game changer for like current players because um that just fundamentally changes like the pace of the game from that standpoint. So I like I kind of like I'm a little bit scared because like I still want to play this when it's like when it's fully out and released, but I don't. But it's hard to like to stop playing this game once like you start it as well because it's like it has a really just like the first Hades, it has a really addictive loop to it because the controlling it feels nice, messing around and playing around with your build feels nice, and at some point I'm like, okay, I have to like stop and like just wait for more updates for this to come out so I can at least like see the full like product and like see what the final version of this is. So I was already hesitant. I was like, should I get early access? Should I not? And then more of my friends started like talking about it. I'm like, fuck. All right, I guess I will.
I mean,
Uh,
it's a very different sort of game, but I talked about, Baldur's Gate 3, and then we
mhm.
talked about previously, Greedfall 2 is going to early access. I think there's a new trailer on that we'll discuss today. Different sorts of games, but there's enough out there where if a game's in early access, it's so easy just to say, well, I'm just going to wait. And that's what I do 90% of the time. However, Hades does seem like the sort of game that's the way that it's focused as like a run-based roguelite seems like you could get your toes wet, do a few runs, and then I have not experienced firsthand, the addictive part of it. Like, oh, I
Mhm.
just one more, just one more.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
with a game like Baldur's Gate, which is a linear narrative, or a game like Greedfall 2, which is likely a linear narrative, it's a lot easier just to say like, well, I'm not going to play this until it's ready, until it's 1.0.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I could see the temptation for a game like Hades 2, like, well, let me just get my feet wet.
Especially when you have like your
Well, let me
peers
just go
around
over it.
you, there's like a community already in your friends that like are already playing it and discussing it. Like, man, I don't want to feel left out. I want to get in on it.
Yeah.
And it's also like it's also easy because like Supergiant has such a solid track record, and they do right by the community and their early access process and release. And Hades is a tried and true formula, so it's kind of like a combination of like tried and true factors that like you could feel safe with this purchase because you already like inherently trust the developer and the way that they've done this before.
Mhm. Well, thank you for talking about your initial experience with Hades 2. Are you planning on playing much more of it? Are you gonna try to force yourself to put it down until it comes out?
I will play maybe a little bit more of it and try to force myself because I mentioned this last week, but like I'm still working through Sandland. I still haven't like got into the Forest Land part. I'm like right at the cusp of it, and I really do want to play more of it, but like there's like other cool releases this month too that like, oh man. And like I don't know if you finished Sandland or not because I know we talked about it a few weeks back, but like it feels like Sandland is like really cool from like what it's doing visually and kind of like the heart of it, but in terms of like the gameplay of it, I feel like I've already seen like what all the gameplay has to offer from the Sandland part. I'm like, I don't know if they're gonna inherently shake it up with the Forest Land part, which I hope they do. But like at this point, I was like, I kind of just needed to like put it down a bit, take a break, and then come back to it, and then you know,
Well, if you're
I
okay
feel
with it, I
yeah,
did finish Sandland in the
yeah.
last few weeks, so we could just tangent into that as a second game.
If you want, I mean, yeah,
I don't know, maybe a little bit, maybe just a small
yeah,
little side
yeah.
side convo. Like, I do agree with you. So I talked about Sandland when I put in like 6 hours 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And then over the course of the last 3 weeks in the gaps, I had it on my Steam Deck and was playing it, and I did manage to see the credits. It's the sort of game, I'm not gonna go into too much detail here, but it's the sort of game where, like, I think it left a really good first impression, but in the middle, it did have a bit of like, "Okay, I've seen this is samey, it hasn't captured me." There is a little bit of once you do unlock the forest land, it's a new environment and new characters, it kind of reinvigorates itself a little bit, but then it kind of runs into, like, the same issue where you're doing a lot of the same things. So it kind of is a little bit up and down. I
Yeah.
did enjoy my time with it, but it's not gonna I'm trying to think the phrasing that came to my mind,
Doesn't
which
Mhm.
shake
sounds
up the formula. Is that what you're trying to say?
no, this sounds harsher than I mean, but the phrase that came to my mind was, "It's not gonna blow your mind." Like it's kind of a known quantity.
I
But
agree. Yeah, I think it's also a little bit obnoxious too. Like when you look at the map, it's like this region alone, this fifth of the map, fifth of the map alone has like 185 chests that you haven't seen yet. And it's like to me, I just like don't understand why there's so much bloat to like the collectible part of it. Like especially when like 99.9% of those chests will have kind of nothing in them except like maybe one or two like ingredients to something that you already have a lot of, and the only other chests that like are kind of quote unquote valuable are like the loot chests, but like to
yeah,
actually have like
and
rarity.
the it has kind of like the Final Fantasy 16 problem where you're like, oh look, more quality bolts. I have 100 of these. Do I
More
need to go out?
fangs.
Yeah, basically. And then the way the game works is that early on, like it has the the tiered rarity gear like so many games have with different color coordination. But later in the game, all of the best gear is all drops. And not I don't mean like post game. I mean like Forest Land on. Like
Mm.
everything that's in chests is only up to like middle, like rare quality, which is like middle of the pack. To get like legend quality, mythic quality, ascend. I don't remember what actually all the terms are. Like all the best gear is all drops. So eventually there's like no motivation to go for chests.
That reminded me
Um
of so many chests in the game.
yeah. Yeah, because I was being completionist and getting the chest, but at one point it's literally like
I can't do it.
I'm only doing this to tick a box. Like it's not actually going to help me at all. I'm just doing it.
I might actually like drive myself insane if I deliberately did not get any of the treasure chest maps, so I don't have to see any treasure chest
Oh
icons on the
yeah.
map. Because I feel like that's
And
what happen if I do that, and then it'll drive me insane.
it sounds a bit silly, but I think there's almost this is gonna sound memey, but I'll try to explain my point. I think there's almost too many vehicle varieties because early on in the game, the first handful of vehicles that you unlock kind of have a niche that makes sense. You have your battle tank, then you get your hopper, which is more mobile but less, not as good in combat. You get your car and then your bike, which are more for traversal. You eventually get a hovercraft, which is good for like quicksand and water. And like those first five, like they all have their niche. But then eventually you get like the battle armor, which is like a slower version of the battle tank, and it's not any more powerful. It's like, well, that's nice, but I'm not going to really use it. I've already invested into my battle tank. I'm not going to go into the battle armor. And then eventually you get a hover tank, and you're like, well, I guess the only niche that solves is that if you wanted to put your resources into it, you can make your hover tank your main combat vehicle, because that way you don't have to switch to your hovercraft. And you can already see we're like, wait, how's the hover tank different from the hovercraft, different from the battle tank? And then there's like a hover bike. Like eventually you get so many vehicle types where I stopped paying attention to them because all of my niches were already filled. Like, oh, if I'm fighting in combat, I use this. If I want something quick, I use this. If I want something that's mobile, I use this. I've already kind of set it. It's kind of like when you have a party in a JRPG and you've kind of got all your roles filled, and then you get a new party member in the back half of the game when you're like, well, I don't know where you fit, sir or ma'am, so I'm not going to use you. That's kind of how I
Yeah,
felt.
I already got like that feeling because I built like another vehicle that can jump, and then it's like it has slightly better like weapons, like heavy weapons on it, and I'm like, okay, cool, I guess. I mean, I'm not like I feel like my primary battle needs are already met. Like if I have to like do something that requires a lot of damage, I'll switch my tank because I upgraded the shit out of it, like its offense. And the fewer hits that something will take, the faster they'll die, and the faster I can move on. You know,
Yeah.
I've never really at a point in that game where like, oh, I need to go switch to like another lighter vehicle to like get more mobility in battle. It's like, no, I'm gonna go to my fucking tank and kill them in 2 shots and move on to my
Yeah.
life. You know,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like a weird, yeah. That game is like really odd in the way that they structured it. Uh, It's just like it's one of those weird things that like I feel like I'm almost the antithesis of this game of like what I wanted it to be in the sense that like when I read the original Sandland manga, I really like the conciseness of it as like a nice, neat, wrapped up story that like wrapped itself up pretty fast. Like, like it told what it needed to tell. And this game just goes obviously the other direction of like, hey, this is a video game and we made it an open world video game, so we need to like put a lot of like activities that will kind of like burn your time to justify the you know getting your money's worth out of this game, I
And
guess.
and a lot of the activities that they add are like the main two diversions outside of exploring the map or progressing the story are the races or the
Mm.
bounties. But
Yeah.
both of those, you do like 4 bounties, and then like they just keep unlocking, and then previous bounties keep tiering up. And yeah, at one point I'm like, all right, I'm bored. Like these are all the same.
Once I
I'm not.
realized what they were doing with the bounties, you're not actually unlocking new ones, you're just unlocking like more higher leveled ones of the same ones. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this.
Oh yeah, so to tear it out for people who haven't played, you'll have like a bounty list. Like, okay, here are 5 marks you can fight, and it shows next to each name the recommended level. Like, oh, I can fight this guy, he's in a battle tank, he's level 10. I can fight this guy, he's on a bike, so he's quicker, he's level 12. And then you can accept these and they go into your quest logger. So, and then let's say you go fight the battle tank bounty, you go fight them, you beat them, you come back, you get a reward. The reward is the same kind of stuff that you're probably already swimming in. And then it's like new bounties unlocked. And like, oh, okay. And it's the same guy, only now instead of level 10, he's level 15. And you fight him again, new bounties unlocked. And, oh, it's the same guy, only now instead of level 15.
And the reward is like definitely not worth it. It's like you get some money
you're
and
like,
like,
oh.
and like a part that like is like very trivial, and it's like, okay.
And then you're like bored. And then so that I didn't latch onto. And then a lot of times the races, they're kind of interesting because you're like, oh, they're better than the bounties. They're not great, but they're better than the bounties. First of all, I had just come off of doing the racing mini game in Eiyuden, which is I don't I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's god awful.
It's pretty bad.
The Eiyuden racing thing feels really like, oh crap, we put racing in our Kickstarter stretch goal. Now we gotta like slap something together here, and it's bad.
It's
The racing in Sandland compared,
Mhm.
I'm like, this is excellent. It's fine. But the thing is that a lot of times it's like one of the ways that this game rewards you is again just kind of the bloat where it's, oh, if I get the top score on this motorbike race, I get an additional motorbike frame so I can build a second motorbike. And that's one thing that this game seems to think that players will be interested in doing that I don't see a
It's
point.
crazy.
Where not only are there ending up like 11 or 12 different classes of vehicles that have very similar roles, but you can get an additional frame. Like, oh, just in case you want to build a second battle tank, you get an additional frame. And you're like, but I don't need to. I already have a really good battle tank. Why would I be interested in building a second one? And to be as generous as possible, you could say, like, well, you could have one with like incendiary damage and one with armor piercing damage. Like, maybe, but it doesn't. There's not a lot of motivation other than like hypotheticals. Like you can see on paper what they were trying to do, but it just doesn't manifest where you're like, I already have a really good battle tank. Not only do I not need to make a second battle tank, but all the later, like I don't need to invest in a battle armor. I don't need to invest in a battle hovercraft. Like, cause I already got my god powered combat mech that I don't need to stray from. So Sandland, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It's fine. I was it left a good first impression and a good final impression, but in the middle, it's very bloated, and that's you use that word, I'm gonna steal it. So it's good description for it.
I just need to push through it. I think I just like
Yeah.
I just need to buckle down. I assume once you hit the first land, it won't be like that much more. But
Yeah. I will say one thing that I do like about it is I do like the idea of framing the protagonist as like someone asked me to describe Beelzebub, like are you playing as an evil character? Like, no, you're just kind of playing as a little shit. Like that's who the protagonist is.
he's great.
So like, all right, more games where the protagonist is just a little shit. Like, there you go. Anyways, that was enough of a tangent, but it was one of the games I did play in the last few weeks, and I know you've been playing as well. So Sandland follow-up impressions slotted in here. So I guess I'll just talk about a few of the other games that I've been playing in my backlog, just very quick. I talked about Aiden very briefly, so I'll just put some final thoughts on that. I know we've kind of already given our main initial talk with Aiden, with mostly Josh and Adam leading the way, and I know a lot of people in the the RPG Site community and as well as here on the podcast staff have been playing it. I did finish it up over the last few weeks. Uh, I really do like. I don't want to say I agree with everything Adam and Josh said because that's not really that interesting, but it is kind of where my thoughts are. The main thing about Aiden Chronicle, first of all, unlike Josh and Adam, I am coming to this as someone who doesn't have the Suikoden nostalgia, and I don't have neither the preconception or like the idea of what that sort of game is. I will say that I'm more interested now in finding time somewhere to go back and play those games. Especially, it seems like 2 is the one that if you're going to play a single Suikoden game is the one you want to play. Aiden, I really do like a lot of the ideas behind it, but in the back half of the game, it really does feel like they just ran out of road really quickly. Like my initial thoughts, it's kind of like Sandland, where it left a very strong first impression. Only the first impression lasted much further into the game. I was like maybe 12, 15, 18 hours into Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes and really enjoying it. And my final impressions of the game are still pretty positive. But at the end of the game, and I don't want to go into like super spoiler
Hmm.
details, but it just feels like there's a lot of issues with the kind of the overarching the war narrative that they feel like they tee up a bunch of like characters and conflicts and things that need to be resolved, and then they're like, oh crap, we have 2 hours to resolve these things. So there's a lot of those war battles that occur back to back to back where so many things happen in like a 6 minute window where I'll just use the word betrayal, where there's like multiple betrayals sequentially, like in a single war battle, which is also kind of like where the game presents itself at its poorest. Because you have like this strange isometric view of these 3D models in this gameplay system that's not super deep or well thought out, but and then immediately uh everything is in the player's favor. All of a sudden, there's no threat, there's no risk. It feels like, oh, everything's gonna be fine. And then there's like their whole idea of having to free these locations on the map that have been occupied. Like there's 4 areas that are freed off screen, and then a fifth one where it's like a single battle and you free it, and it just feels like, oh, the war is wrapping up. That was quick. Like this was never really a threat. And then the antagonist, I can't put my finger on why, but I never really felt like I needed to be scared of him or worried about him or that I was ever at risk of being defeated by him. And I don't mean in terms of like a gameplay sense, because even in games that are not difficult to play, the conflict is presented in a way where you feel the tension, you feel the risk, you feel like the story beats. Where here, I just never felt like the Duke was a threat at all, like narratively, gameplay wise. He was just, he almost was like he was a very poor antagonist. I never
Yeah,
really
no,
felt like
I can see that, especially like when you have like it's kind of because they definitely lean on him on like kind of being one of the big bads in Suikoden 2 that was very very ruthless, but you can feel that he's an emanating threat in that game. While in this
mm,
one, they definitely try to posture him as like containing the same energy, but never really manages to get to live up to like how Suikoden 2 handle its
yeah, and
primary antagonist.
I was trying to think to myself, okay, Brian, actually, I go into a little bit of critique here. Why didn't you like the character? Like, why didn't you feel it? And I think because like his motivations were pretty nebulous. He's just like, I want power to become stronger because I want power. And that like his motivations never get more nuanced than that, never get more interesting than that. And then so basically because his motivations never gets fleshed out, your motivation to go against him, you're like, well, that's not the right thing to do. What we're doing is the right thing to do. So your trio of protagonists are just like immediately in the good and he's immediately in the bad. There's no trade-off. It's just like we are side of good, you are side of bad. We must defeat you. The end. So I never really latched onto the story part of it. But to say things more positive, I did like the just this the characterization of all the individual characters with as much limited time as they had to account for the 100 plus characters. Thought they did pretty well. um Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the criticism of this game is its PlayStation and Switch like performance. Apparently like a more recent patch on PlayStation completely tanked, like I like apparently this is hearsay because I've been playing the PC version, which for me has been generally fine, but the Switch version apparently launched and has never improved from a pretty bad state. I've seen through forum threads that the PlayStation update made a lot of things worse. So as obviously for those that have been playing on either console is not a good look. But luckily the PC port has been for me fine.
I heard there's like
I
some
do
issues like with the Game Pass version as well. So it's like that's like I feel like
yeah.
just in general each
That
console
makes
has like
sense.
its own
Yeah.
quirks. Yeah.
Yeah. The a lot of the I know Adam spent a decent amount of time in his review talking about how a lot of the kind of like in Sandland again. I guess I played those games back to back, so that's why I'm comparing them. A lot of the diversionary bits don't really come together. I've already talked about the racing, the cooking battle. Like I didn't know this, but apparently, like before they patched it, you could win every cooking battle just by like spamming some sort of egg dish that like everyone liked.
Yeah. Apparently that
Uh,
was like a thing. Like Adam and I didn't know, obviously, but just like Yeah, it was really funny. And, okay, now that you mentioned it, since I had some friends playing it, there's actually like a mod for the game where it takes off the cooldown timer after you do a cooking contest. So after you do a cooking contest and you win it, and you have to wait for the next one, it's like around 15 minutes. There's a mod to get rid of that 15-minute wait and just go immediately to the next one. And when you
Yeah.
think about it, like from like kind of a bigger picture perspective, like the structure of the cooking contest is sort of maddening in the sense that like they on a structural level they try to encourage you to just like, hey, do a cooking contest here and there as you're progressing through the game, but it's difficult to like really do the cooking contest until you've built up a good repertoire of like recipes that you can like employ for not doing like the egg cheese strat. um so so it's one of those things where like, okay, so you're better off just marathoning your mind off of the cooking contest to get to that character once you build up enough recipes, and then you had this 50-minute like cooldown for it. So it's like it's kind of this weird catch-22 situation with that.
And I'm also like, why are there so many recipes? It feels like they just wanted to have some sort of collectible to do, like to find, to kind of gather and collect. But like you go to the recipe, like how many recipes did you or Adam actually cook to actually use in battle out of like the 70 available ones? Like I hardly ever did. The battles never really necessitate it.
Uh,
And not only that, but like you'll get 6 different recipes that all do the same thing. Like literally have this, like they are functionally equivalent in battle.
Adam, did you
And like
ever use the recipes for a gameplay function and not the
Nope.
cooking contest function? Okay, me
Nope.
too.
yeah, so it's me neither. So that in itself shows that something was not leveraged right. I do think the Bigoma, the Beyblades, it wasn't deep, but it was probably the best implemented. The fact that it had a story attached to it and a couple characters attached was fine. I do think the actual like match could have used a new a mechanic or two other than just deciding when to boost spin. But I do think that, I mean, compared to the cooking contest and the racing, I suppose it was good. Uh,
Yeah, go for it.
I would say the baseline combat was fine. It kind of falls into the same trap that so many other games fall into. That once you find a party that works really well, you're not really incentivized to deviate from it. But that's a trickier problem to solve. And I was still enjoying combat
Yeah.
by late in the game. So it wasn't the it wasn't gonna blow your mind. I'm gonna keep using that statement, but it was fine. I was still enjoying just the straight gameplay at the end of the game. The duel system never made sense to me. Like the break, boost, defend for the duels.
Yeah.
Uh, that felt like they had like an idea in place, but didn't implement it. Like I can't imagine that was the vision for that. Uh, but luckily there's so few of them. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
I've been on Aiden enough. I'm glad that I played it. I still call it a good game, but, like, just outside of probably, like, my top 10 for the year. Uh,
It's definitely
makes
one
it
of those
more
games that like you can tell it was kind of it's definitely built as a Kickstarter game, and you can kind of feel that
yeah.
throughout the game of like they had a lot of ambitious goals that they really wanted to meet within that base game. They didn't want like a Bloodstained situation where like they promised features and then they had to wait years to implement them eventually to fulfill them. They just wanted like it to be kind of feature complete from the get go, for better or for worse, on like how the actual implementation of those features were. Which is, I mean, that's fine. It's
And I
fine.
think I would have thought of the game just, like, a notch better if it didn't so clearly run out of road in, like, the last 5 hours. Like, it really
Right.
feels like, "Oh, we gotta wrap this shit up. Okay, it's done." Like, "Wait, what?" And, yeah. If it had kept the same pace, um, I think I would have thought about it just marginally better.
Hopefully, they have like the resources that they don't have to go through a Kickstarter or crowdfunded route next time to do like if they
Mhm.
decide to do that sequel that they were talking about, and like just kind of basically get like have a vision for it and like stick with it without being beholden to like a crowdfunded stretch goals. Or
And they'll have the foundation present and hopefully like the workflow established so they
right.
can iterate and improve on a follow-up or a sequel.
Mhm.
To quickly wrap up, I did also finish and play because it's pretty short. It was in my backlog. Super Mario RPG. I had played the Super Nintendo version a long time ago, so this is kind of a refresher. I knew it was a short game. Um, not a whole lot to say on it. I think it's kind of a known quantity. I still think that both of the Paper Mario RPGs are better games, which I feel like was blasphemous at the time that Paper Mario 1 came out. So I don't know what the opinions are now. But out of the Mario RPGs, I would say like Super Mario RPG is probably middle of the pack. Um, Obviously, we'll probably talk in a week or so about the Thousand Year Door remaster remake. And then to finish off my backlog, I am currently playing Emerald Beyond, which I am enjoying immensely. I'll save any further thoughts until I get further in that game, but I played the demo to its fullest extent, so I picked it back up with the demo transfer, and that's what I'm working on now. So with that tangent kind of out of the way, kind of my backlog blitz and kind of recapping some of the other games that released in April. The next game that we have on our list is a game that released just a couple days ago, and I've seen this title show up in my social feed, but I don't know much about it, so I'll need James to tee it up for me. That is the release of Dread Delusion, which is a game that I believe was in early access, and this was its 1.0 release a few days ago. So, James, I see that you've been playing this game. You wanted to talk about it here today. So, tee us up. What is Dread Delusion, and how has your time been with it so far?
Okay, so Dread Delusion is a open world action RPG that's inspired by games like Morrowind and Kingsfield, going by the developers' own statements on the Steam page and whatnot. It's really cool. I don't know the best way to kind of like tackle this, but I'll just say it. This is some of the coolest like world building I've seen in an RPG in a while. Like some of the writing and the lore and whatnot that you can kind of discover as you're going through the game. Because first off, the game takes place on, and it's not a super like new idea. It takes place on sky islands. They're in the sky. The world down below has been basically ruined, uninhabitable. There was some calamity like 400 years ago called the World Rend that caused the like 99.99% of the population to die, and pretty much the only people that were alive were the ones that were on these sky islands in the first place. So there's a bunch of people like up there that like saw down below like the flash, and it's like, oh, something happened, but nobody alive really knows the specifics of what went down, which is fascinating because one of the things this game has is that, so there's three main like kingdoms you kind of focus on in this, and one of the things that this world and lore kind of deals with is that the game world, the Oneric Isles, are a small section of the Sky Islands that very specifically are on like the fringes of the apostatic union's grasp. So there's like room for things to kind of fall under the radar. There's various factions, that sort of thing. So you'll find like these lore books, and they'll explain like some of the lore of the world. Like 40 years ago, there was this thing called the God War, where in the like after the collapse of whatever civilization was down there, the Amberians, the survivors basically had to rely on the power of these gods with the through contracts with this group of like, I guess, demigods called Wiccans to basically use their power to stay alive. Like, for example, the first real town you visit is one that cultivates mushrooms, and that's their main resource. That's the stuff that they can basically trade with. It's their lifeblood. And in the past, their contract with their god was, oh, every so often you have to sacrifice someone to the giant mushroom so the mushrooms keep growing. You basically have to like just stuff them in there. And because they know, because the apostatic union basically in the God War just outlawed any sort of worship and was like, we're not going to deal with this anymore. Unfortunately, they don't know how to get the crops to grow. So there's a famine, and that's like one of the kind of recurring thoughts in the game is that like even when these power structures are like abolished, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are hunky-dory, because just because you know that a previous system was bad doesn't necessarily mean that you're prepared to do everything that you need to in the new system. And every like kind of area you go to, you see that kind of echoed a bit. And it's not in like a centrist sort of way. It's just like actually thinking about the consequences of, yeah, this sucked, but there's a reason why it lasted so long. How are we going to fix this? What's the plan going forward? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I when I was checking in on this game, I heard there was like a lot of like careful consideration of like having like almost like a faction, diverging factions in this game. Like I know there's like a cult that's like an anti-god sort of like cult going on. And it's like, man, this looks. It's definitely one of those like wandering surreal RPGs that you kind of just kind of go around and you kind of learn more and more about like the state of like what the fuck happened in this world with like really bizarre NPC dialogue.
Yeah. I would say that the strongest aspect of this is that the writing for some of the side quests, especially in the Clockwork Kingdom, which is but one funny thing is that sometimes you'll play an early access game and you'll get to the point of the game that was added in last, and you can notice, oh, this is noticeably better than the rest of the early access content. And I would definitely say that the writing for really kind of peaks in the Clockwork Kingdom, because there's a bunch of different things going on. Put in perspective, one of the core aspects of this world is that the way magic works is people are literally tapping into the source code of the universe and then using that to write things into existence.
Pretty sick.
But there's limitations, like they can see the source code and they can borrow from it and use it, basically playing by the universe's own rules in that sense. But there's certain things that like you can't like rewrite the source code. You can't rewrite reality. You can only make things that technically could exist. And so one of the core aspects of the story is that everything's fucked up. Like people are holding on, but like by a thread. And pretty much everyone realizes that maybe there's not an easy way forward. Maybe it's just going to continue to be a slow decline. And there's this one person, Velkolos, who is this notorious sky pirate, like vigilante, who has kind of gone off the deep end because she found a map pointing to something down below in the Underlands that has the potential to rewrite reality.
Oh.
So the core thing of the story is that you're actually a prisoner of the Apostatic Union, which are the anti-god faction, which is basically the ruling faction for most of the Skylands. And you're basically forced into, hey, you could rot in a cell, but we're going to force you to try and capture her, even though there's like very low chance you'll be able to. She escapes, and then you're basically tasked with trying to find some of her former allies that when they realized what she was trying to do and the dangers of what she was trying to do, because like rewriting reality, yeah, you can make things better, but potentially that's what caused the world end in the first place. And people are barely holding on now. You could just unravel reality entirely if you're not careful. So basically, once you finish up that quick tutorial thing where you like see her like head off, then it's just like, okay, here's 4 people you need to find. Here's the one where we know where he's actually at. Find all 4 of them, get them to come back to this location, and we will figure out how we're going to like chase after her. Like we need to know where she's going, what her plan is. We need more information, that sort of thing. And so you have like them scattered across the different kingdoms. One of them is in the Endless realm, which is really interesting because the Endless are kind of like Fallout ghouls in the sense that they're like basically immortal, but they're older than the World Ren because they were like a civilization that lived in the Sky Realms, and they fucked up because one of the rules of the universe is that you can't reverse death, but there's nothing against making someone immortal. But as a result of that spell that they cast, like half of that kingdom were turned into basically immortal zombies, and the other half were just like literally devoured. Because when the people first turned into zombies, they couldn't control themselves. They just had like a primal desire to like eat flesh. And like once they fought, but they knew what they were doing, and pretty much all of them are like that's a deep scar in the kingdom because now they have things under control, and they've designed that they've used magic to make like these flesh farms that make like meat that don't think. but all of these people, they're still like decomposing and whatnot because they're immortal, but in the sense that they aren't alive, but they can't truly be dead. And it goes to its like logical conclusion with that, where like right when they first like kind of awoke as endless, and they had that like primal desire to like feast on flesh, there were like wars between the endless and like the rest of the living like groups on the Sky Islands. And one of these side quests that you can do is you actually have this dragon that's flying around, and most of them it's like you don't want to deal with, you don't want to mess with, because it's like a giant dragon. I'm not being paid enough for this. This one sits down on a perch and talks to you, and you're like, what? And basically what happened is that this dragon has devoured enough endless, but the endless aren't truly dead. Their consciousnesses still exist. So basically this dragon has eaten so many endless that basically it's a hive mind of endless consciousnesses that have taken over the dragon's body.
Dang, that sounds sick as fuck.
Yeah, and so one of the things that it tasks you to do is, so there's these urns, and they're called anguish urns, and the reason why is because, like, during basically those crusades against the endless, like, hundreds, thousands of these endless were basically cremated, and in those ashes, because the endless can't truly die, it's like it's hell. They're basically in purgatory because there's the ashes, they're still conscious, but it's like pitch black. So what the dragon tasks you with is get those urns, bring them to the dragon. We will force the dragon to eat the urns, so our brethren can at least have some sort of release from that hell by becoming part of our hive mind, which is really fascinating.
What were you saying, Brian, earlier?
I was just saying, like, this sounds like basically I'm like, oh man, I gotta put this game on my list. Damn it. Because it sounds like a really fun marriage of actual good environmental storytelling, not just like we put skeletons in funny poses, like actually like trying to piece together the events of the world, tie that into interesting, like, this is how this world works, these are mechanisms that are unique to this mythos, and also tied into like the questing aspect of this game. Like the way that James is describing it, it seems like it's just like a really fun blend of all three of those components put together. And I'm like, damn it, like that sounds really interesting. I gotta play this.
And especially like the thing that'll catch your eye like immediately is kind of like the look of it has that low polygonal look, almost like a PS1 era from first person perspective style. And I really like the way that like they kind of do like lock picking and chance stuff by like through like visible dice rolls. And there's like there's like an aspect of luck to the game to like making sure like, hey, you'll have like limited like lock picks, and like it's kind of decided by like whether you pass or fail through like die rolls, and that kind of gives it a quaint feel to it.
Yeah, it's kind of got that retro aesthetic, but I don't know, it's really pleasing to look at. I've been watching screenshots and trailers as James has been talking.
Yeah. I don't want to talk like too much about like all like some of the more important side quests. There's like in the Clockwork Kingdom, there's like a bunch of different quests that kind of tie together in the sense that like in like the other regions, you do get like learn more about each region by doing quests. But the Clockwork Kingdom, I feel like, is the highlight because you learn bits and pieces about like characters that are basically part of the main plot in that region. And the core conceit of it's called the Clockwork Kingdom because the scholars of this kingdom made shorthand that could be read by a machine for the code of the universe. And basically we're like, okay, we are going to design our own god that will basically make our lives easier.
I think you give it a good sample of like, you know, what people could expect. Because I feel like we're treading into like, hey, people. I think some people will want to like find this out for themselves too. On that, so it might be like
that's surface level stuff. That's surface level stuff for Clockwork Kingdom. But yeah, it's really fascinating. There's a lot of stuff that I could talk about with the lore aspect. Two problems. One, this game is still pretty buggy, especially the stuff that they added that wasn't in the early access version. Like you can get a skyship, you can actually fly around, and you get that like later on in the story. That's a bit buggy. One other thing, for whatever reason, the camera rotation when you're in the ship is so fucking slow. The sensitivity is so low, even if you have your look sensitivity for when you're on foot, like pretty high. So hopefully they fix that. There's a lot of like collision issues. There's a lot of they just had to fix an issue where some quests weren't progressing properly because stuff wasn't loading in properly. There's some dialogue checks that are misplaced in the last like area. So if you're playing this, probably by the time you get there, there will be a patch, but maybe like wait a week or two just for things to get kind of ironed out.
Yeah, I'll give it like a few months, and maybe I'll check it out when there's like time. But okay,
Yeah.
good.
The
good
other
to know.
thing, the other thing is that the combat is all right, but it's really basic. And the best way to describe combat is, I'm still the only one that's played Lunacid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen gameplay of Lunacid and watched friends, but I haven't actually played it myself.
Yeah, Lunacid's gameplay is pretty basic, but I'd say that the spell casting is the best part of it. The reason I mentioned Lunacid is that Kira, the main developer of Lunacid, helped on the combat in this game.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. But combat is just, it's okay.
I mean,
it's not the reason why you play. It's not the reason why you play the game. Yeah.
I think it's okay to have like basic pushing combat if the dressing around like, hey, what the real allure is for this game is like you're really out, like, and that's the main sell of the game. You're coming in here for the world building and learning more about this world, not necessarily for like some sick combat system.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna write up a review for this probably this weekend to get it out because I did finish the game.
Okay.
How long did it take you? Just curious.
About 20 hours, and that was doing not all, but most of the side content.
Okay. Part of me is like, thank goodness, because I've seen people compare this to like Morrowind, and like, okay, Elder Scrolls, you could get lost for hundreds of hours. Okay, it's reasonable. So okay, not saying shorter is better or longer is worse. Just I can fit this one in because it sounds really interesting and kind of unique.
Thank God, right? With all these indie releases in the last week and a half. Like, God. Yep.
And I think that kind of covers all the games we planned on talking about this week. So we have a few things teed up for next week that we kind of mentioned, like the Paper Mario remaster is coming out later in the month, things like that. We'll be talking a lot more about summer releases. A good chunk of our headlines later in this podcast are basically a ton of dates for games changing platforms or releasing late in the summer or early in fall. So we'll go into all those. Did anyone else have any other games they wanted to talk about before we go into the news section?
What do you got, Chow?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. That's a good game.
You had to think about it.
I know. It's my favorite game, actually.
Before we go into the headlines, we do have one other feature up on the website at rpgsite.net that I want to talk about. This was up from Junior Miyai from a couple days ago. He did play through another one of those indie releases that released in May, Crow Country. Not strictly an RPG, so he used our branching path label for it, but basically wrote up his impressions on Crow Country up on the site from the lens of someone who would enjoy RPGs. What sort of game is this? I don't really know much about it other than it's another indie game that's released in the last couple of weeks that has really good word of mouth and kind of a really appealing like retro art style. Has anyone else here just before I display
it's like a marriage. It's a marriage of like FF7 style, like the chibi early 3D graphics with like the Resident Evil perspective and sort of like the way that you
fixed camera stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a very neat blend of like very two distinct like games and genres that established, both from like a gameplay and visual perspective. I hear a lot of good word about that. It seems really cool.
Yeah, it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam, 99% of reviews. So always a good sign because sometimes the Steam crowd is hard to please, but seems like they're all on the same page on this one. In terms of main news here, we have one kind of headline that is studio focused and one headline that is a game announcement. One is Japanese focused and one is Western. So I believe I was not here, but in the last week, did you talk about the Square Enix fiscal results?
No, we haven't talked about those yet because those released on Monday. Sunday night.
Okay, well, maybe I'll hand it off to Adam, since you always seem to have a really good hand on feel on these. So Square Enix did release their fiscal results, which I know a lot of people were eager, specifically in the context of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI a year later. And then they've also announced a little bit of detail about their strategy and plan going forward. So I can go into that, or I can hand it off to you if you want to talk about some of the high level highlights
Yeah,
for
I have some
the
notes.
results.
So
Yeah, okay, you're prepared.
yeah.
Take it away.
Okay, so there's a lot of things to get to with Square Enix's like fiscal year results. The first thing to start off with is that you always start off with sales are up, but income is down year over year. So they're still making money, but they're not making as much money as they used to, even though they have actually sold more. So what that tells you is that basically the costs that they incurred this year were higher, but they still made less money than they did last year. And that's probably, or very likely, because they did release 2 AAA games this year. That would be Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And in fact, with this new fiscal year, they actually haven't done this for the last 3 years or so, but they actually give a breakdown of per segment results, or I should say sub-segment results. And one of the, probably the most interesting thing to note, so Square Enix, they have like digital entertainment, they have like publishing, amusement, and merchandise. I think those are like 4 main segments. And in the digital entertainment segment, there are 3 sub-segments, which are HD games. Now, HD games is basically any console game or PC game that's not like mobile and not an MMO. So Dawntrail, Final Fantasy XIV is not in there. Dragon Quest X, the MMO is not in there. None of their mobile games, but that's basically everything else. So the HD games, that includes Final Fantasy XVI, that includes Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that includes Infinity Strash, The Adventures of Dai.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. They're all in the same bucket.
Yeah.
I say that because some people seem to get confused that like HD games is just AAA. No, it's not. It's everything. That's like a console PC game.
So like Pixel Remaster would be
Yes,
count
Pixel
as the
Remaster
same
is in
category.
there. Yeah, it's all the same bucket. And that segment lost money last year. It also lost money the year before. So Square Enix, quite literally, is losing money when they sell these games. They cost more to make than the revenue they are earning from them. They say this directly. That's not good. It's also not the first time they've lost money on these in this segment. It happened in the past, which is one reason why they stopped reporting this directly. But they brought it back, and they are losing money.
I remember you were discussing this with a friend of yours, and then your friend said, like, if I was an investor for them, I'd be asked them, why are you still making HD games then? If these are
I mean,
results?
that's a fair question. Like, if Square Enix was a company that only sold an MMO and only sold mobile games, they would be making more money. Literally. So, even though, and I've seen some people complain or argue, like, but actually their HD game sales are up. And it's like, yes, that is also true. They are selling more. The revenue that they are getting from HD games is higher, but they are not offsetting the costs, is what it comes down to. So that's the problem. So that's basically the first step, or the first note, is that Square Enix's HD game segment is their weakest segment right now, and they need to, improve their cost to sales ratio. They need to improve their pipeline, maybe their release cadence of the AAA stuff that sells.
They seem to have a plan. Like some things are like shift from quantity to quality, they say in this report.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to talk to, I'll get to the medium term plan in a second. Now, whenever one of these companies gives a presentation of the results, they oftentimes will take questions from shareholders and investors. Now, a lot of companies, especially in the West, will live stream this. And literally, you can watch them. You can call in. You can watch them on a stream. And some companies even go to YouTube to do this. A lot of Japanese companies don't do this, and that you have to be in the room to participate or report on the Q&A. And Square Enix held theirs, so we have basically a secondhand reporting on what President Takashi Kiryu said, and he basically said. Final Fantasy XVI sales fell short of expectations. The initial momentum was in line with expectations, which they reported on like 6 months ago, but it failed to reach the fiscal year goal as the momentum slowed over time. It sold 3 million. We know that. That's the only number they've given. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales also sold short of expectations. The initial momentum did not reach their target. We don't know the sales number. They also mentioned Foam Stars also fell short of expectations. Sort of sounds silly to include that with the other two, but it did come out in the last quarter, so people are going to ask about it.
Yeah, it was an HD title, and they marketed it a lot, like Atlus SGF. That was their main thing they were pushing.
Yep.
If I don't know if anyone here watched any of the Giant Bomb at night, like couch things, but if you saw that like rubber duck plush, that was literally something they were just giving to people at SGF.
Yep.
Yeah,
I actually didn't even know that game came out, to be honest with you.
Well, it's sort of weird in that it came out as like a PlayStation Plus exclusive for a while. And then like a month later, like in late March, I guess, you could actually buy it digitally on PlayStation. But it is a PlayStation exclusive.
They were baking like the Rocket League model.
Yeah.
That.
And it didn't help that also, like, apparently the item shop there, like one of the things they were obviously trying to do is like, oh, we want to have something that's like Fortnite. People buy these different outfits. The prices for character sets for like cosmetics were insane.
It was like $40, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Like a full price of the whole game for like a costume set.
Yeah,
for one character. For one character.
Wow.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to get to, there's a lot more we could get to with Square Enix, but they have a new medium-term plan. Now, a medium-term plan is actually something that a lot of Japanese publishers do, where they basically say, they basically group their fiscal years into like groups of 3. So 3 fiscal years makes a medium term. And so we just finished the previous medium term plan, and they basically first they went over like a look back at their medium term plan, and they basically said they launched many titles, but many failed to live up to expectations, especially outsourced and AAA titles. There was a slowdown in their mobile market. They even say here, this is sort of amusing to me that they say this outright because we said this 2 years ago. Quote, cannibalization of our new titles due to launch schedule overlap.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy
they
shit.
sold
That's
games
crazy.
too close to each other where the buyers had to choose to buy one over the other. And so like they spread them out.
Saw this coming.
They could have sold more.
I mean, like, I'm shocked. I tell you.
Shocked Pikachu.
It's almost like releasing a damn near a game a week in the span of like 3 months at the end of 2022 was a bad fucking plan. Yeah.
And so they talk about their new medium-term plan. Now they have 4 bullet points here. The top level bullet point is a little bit business jargon, but we can go into them. The first one is enhance productivity by optimizing development footprint in digital entertainment. So that's video games. And this section is, they literally call it shifting from quantity to quality. And so they talk about streamlining their like AAA development. They're talking about changing up how they do their, they even say here, keep and build on fan bases for our major franchises by regularly releasing AAA titles, release mid-class titles based on strategies for individual lineups, for prioritizing profitability, which is like, of course, like they're going to try to sell AAA games and try to sell mid-term games or mid-tier games, mid-class games, and try to like structure them better so that they can achieve higher sales with those. They're going to be changing their studio structure. They're no longer called business units. They're called studios now. They are, there's some internal changes that they talk about in vague terms here that they say retire its business unit organizational design and strive to establish operationally integrated organization with the goal of revamping internal title development. So the details of this, like who reports to who or structure of teams or whatever, we can't say, but they're changing something to try to improve the pipeline, costs, development cadence of their games. That's kind of like the first section of their medium-term plan.
I'm glad they're finally going to deliver "quote unquote" fun.
Yeah, that's what they're
but I have
striving.
fun.
That's what they want to
That's what they say. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think the biggest keynote, I think it's something is like shift to a multi-platform strategy.
Yeah, that's the next section. That's the next bullet point. So that was the first bullet point, was the development footprint of digital entertainment. The next bullet point is diversify earnings opportunities by strengthening customer contact points, which is kind of a weird lingo to say. Aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. Build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles in regards to major franchises and AAA titles.
That's crazy. Huge idea.
You know, I feel like with Final Fantasy is that you limited your fan base to PlayStation, and the base fan base has grown older, and there's less growth to the series. It's like, who cannot see like this steep downhill coming by locking yourself to exclusivity?
To be honest, the bullet point here, like, is like the that's the obvious one for like most people, right? Of like, hey, bring it to all the major platforms and PCs. But like they refer to their mobile titles as SD titles here, in the lingo. So they wanted to devise a platform strategy for SD titles, mobile games, to also not only include iOS and Android, but the possibility of also PC launches. And then when you think of that, you think of like, how much HoYoverse has been doing with Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail,
or Ever Crisis.
In terms of, Ever Crisis. But like, but the HoYoverse, they unify those launches. It's usually day and date when when like Honkai, like you'll have the PC version there, or like unifying basically.
Yeah, well, yes and no, because didn't both Genshin and Honkai's like PlayStation versions come later, like 6 months later or something like that?
Just Honkai. Genshin, they launched at the same time.
Remember, we're not talking about the multi-platform releases here. They're talking about not only iOS and Android, but also the possibility of PC launches as well.
Yeah.
There's away from the platform, the major platform holders and PCs, but they've I think they also want to get into that model, the HoYoverse of like the day and date mobile and PC, not mobile then PC. I think they also want to do the mobile and PC simultaneous launch, and then consider maybe another platform down the line, like that HoYoverse does. Which is interesting to me.
Another section of this bullet point, this strengthening customer contact, part of this medium-term plan, is pursue integrated sales and marketing operations, which is consolidate marketing functions that were previously spread across creative business units, expanding shared knowledge and eliminating duplicate functions, which very likely was part of the layoffs that we saw in some of the Square Enix North American and European branches. They say eliminating duplicate functions and consolidate marketing functions. Unfortunately, that they're trying to slim down a little bit, and that means job loss.
It's very fast too. It's an ongoing process too. This report came out, then it's like the next day for us in the West, Monday, and then it's like, okay, they're having an all hands meeting, and then and then a few hours later, we saw some people who worked at Square Enix like, oh, I've been laid off. It's holy shit. It was very fast.
Yeah, that was sudden. Like, I think I saw Twitter posts like as soon as this fiscal report came out, it's like, oh, I've been laid off. Like, damn.
Yeah, and the last part of this bullet point is a lot of companies, especially Japanese companies, are doing this, where they're trying to incorporate their IP, their franchises, into more merch and opportunities, trying to basically diversify their revenue streams. Like, hey, we can not only just sell video games, but we can sell toys and collectibles and branded stuff and whatever. So
does that also include like you just look at like Fallout the last month and two, like, oh, now it's got a well reviewed show.
Yeah, they do say pursue a cross media strategy.
Software purchases, and now it's in Fortnite.
New Final Fantasy movie.
Yeah,
the spirit inside.
But I mean, I'm really thinking a lot about this in terms of like the ongoing conversation with Square Enix, especially of their Japanese presence with their mobile titles. It's like, I wonder if they're gonna like start really like aggressively cutting down the amount of mobile titles they're gonna start producing over there in Japan, because like shortly after this, they started shutting down like a mobile game called Toa Sugai, and most recently Near Reincarnation. They shut down the Infinity Strash Dragon Quest mobile, or not the Dragon Quest Die mobile game, not the Infinity Strash one, which that came out as a console game. Like, to me, I'm wondering if they're actually going to start like thinking about this, like slimming down the amount of like mobile presence that they have, and like because they're also shifting it to like I think a one internal studio dedicated to mobile games or that division.
And it's
So
going to be headed
how
by
many
the
division is
it's going
there?
to be headed by the Dragon Quest producer Miyake.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how many divisions are there? The first division would be like AAA game, like Rebirth and stuff, right? Then there's the second division, and I know the third division is the Final Fantasy XIV division, and then what's the fourth one?
I've actually lost count. Like they've shuffled it around so many times. But I want to emphasize a few things. One,
Mhm.
Square Enix actually makes money off their mobile games. They don't make money
Yes.
off their HD games right now.
Yep.
Like that's true. People may not think of Square Enix like a mobile game company, but that's where they make their money right now, and also MMOs, of course. And one thing I wanted to say that I should have said earlier, I saw a lot of people claim, oh, the only reason why Square Enix's HD games section lost money, that has to do with that extraordinary loss, right? No, that's actually quite literally the reason why they call it extraordinary. When they basically canceled in development games, they call that and catalog it as an extraordinary loss, literally to take that loss out of the segment and report it separately. So that's actually in a different spot of the income. Like there's literally a table of their income statement, and that's literally in a different section now. It's there and it counts, but it's not part of the HD game segment. So that segment, if it wasn't an extraordinary loss, would have lost even more money in that segment. It's just like how you label it.
It's basically how you organize the report and present it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Because if you were to like bundle everything in, you'd have big bold red letters of like minus 10,000% or something, and it's like, oh, okay,
yeah. You might have heard a couple of different numbers thrown around, like, oh, Square Enix's profits are down 12%. No, they're down 25%. No, they're down 70%.
Yeah.
And the answer is actually all those numbers are correct. It just depends on where you're looking. Like, I think the overall profit is down like 10 or 15%. HD Games profit is down, or loss is up 25% or whatever. And it also depends if you're talking about sales or income. Those are two different numbers. But the big overall number is 70% less, because that's including the extraordinary loss. So that's the big number, like overall. It's like a 70% decrease. So
because if you were to bundle that in a single report, you'd have headlines like, "Oh my God, Square Enix lost like almost all of their fucking money because of like It's like, okay.
Well, I mean, it is in there, and you can.
It's true. I mean,
it's just.
But if you were an investor, you'd be like pulling your stock out right now.
Well, I think their share prices dropped quite a bit.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh yeah, and you don't have like a big release like anytime soon. So
well, that was actually quite literally
Dawntrail.
Well, that was actually quite literally what investors were asking. Is Japanese investors were like, well, okay, what is your big release coming up, especially in HD games? You don't have one, not really. Like, yeah, they have a couple of titles, and we'll talk about these, but they don't have like a big title that's on the level of Rebirth or 16. They have Dawntrail, but that is a separate.
Yeah, and I guess considering these results, the question wouldn't be what's your games on the level of 16 Rebirth, but more what's your games are going to put out that it's going to right the ship and be above those titles.
Yeah, and actually make money.
Kingdom Hearts 4, guys. Yes.
Yeah, surely that'll come out.
I mean, like let's say if it even like there's no shot it's going to come out this year, but let's say it even come out. Do you think it actually right the ship?
No.
If it was day one on PC and like I guess like
I don't think it would not meet the sales to right the ship. I don't think they have the fan styes for it.
I think the fan base grew out of the fandom by like the third game.
Yeah, I would say that I am curious about how Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to do. I think that it's going to do all right, but there's a lot of people that I'm friends with that are very much Kingdom Hearts fanboys, and it's like, look, you're excited for this, but for the average player, how many folks are interested in playing more Kingdom Hearts after they finally got Kingdom Hearts 3?
Yeah, this is somewhat conjecture, but Kingdom Hearts 3 does sort of feel like kind of a natural jumping off point. Like, all right, that was the conclusion of the last 20 years of games or whatever. Good time to stop. Again, that's conjecture, but
Yeah.
so
They would have to like rebrand as like just Kingdom Hearts again with no number.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that like one of the few things we know about Kingdom Hearts 4 is one of the characters from the mobile game is the main character in this one.
yeah,
Right.
good job.
One
other
Brian,
thing I
what's
wanted
the
to
name
mention.
again? Sorry.
Oh yeah, Strelitzia,
Yeah, that's right.
something like that. One other thing I wanted to mention, I've seen a lot of people say, as if it's this simple, oh, Square Enix just simply expects too much. They should lower their expectations and everything would be fine. It doesn't work that way, though.
Yeah.
If they were to lower their expectations, to me, I would argue, and tell me if I'm wrong, that means they would also have to lower their budgets. Because budgets are set on expectations. And if they want to lower their expectations, they need to spend less money on their games.
Yeah, I mean, you saw my tweet about it, but it's like when it comes to Rebirth, especially, we do not know sales data for Rebirth. We know sales data to a certain extent for 16. That to me implies that Rebirth sales are noticeably below 16, which lines up with what we know from Japan sales. Let's say that it sold like around 2 million copies. Even if all of those were sold at full price, like, let's say the game's budget was 100 million. And even then, I think that might be a bit low considering what's in that game. You got to account for the retailer price cut, like the cut of that. You got to account for the marketing, though Sony did some of that. You've got to account for the PSN cut, even for digital copies. It's like, there's a decent chance that Rebirth just straight up lost money so far.
Yeah.
Definitely would agree with that. Like when I play this game, like this can't be cheap to make. It's like there's way too much shit here.
It's like I understand that Square Enix has a reputation, especially considering like Tomb Raider like 2013, where it's like, oh, this sold like however many copies, this should have made money. Why are you saying this is a disappointment? But it's like, yeah, that can be true. But also if you look at like the situation surrounding Rebirth and what we do know about it, no shit, it hasn't met up with expectations.
I mean, if you compare its sales to like other AAA like flagship games from other companies, like Elden Ring or Monster Hunter or even Resident Evil,
Dragon's Dogma 2.
Dragon's Dogma 2 is already at like 2.5 million, and
no, it's above that. It's like over 3 million.
Wait, I thought the Capcom report had it like 2 point something, but maybe
I think it was 2.5. Then
I thought it was more than that.
It was like
no. It was 2.5 at the beginning of April. The most recent number. So the most recent number, it's higher than that. IR Capcom. 1 second. I know it was 3 something. Let me just double check. Thank God Capcom just actually shares their sales data. 1 second.
They love to flex on it, so no.
Yep.
But regardless, while you're looking that up, so when you look at Capcom's best-selling games or Bandai Namco with Elden Ring or what have you, like they're going to get a lot more revenue when you sell, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 million copies, and they can put more budget into those games. Where if Square Enix this sounds silly, but if it's only selling like 3 million is your ceiling, they can't put as much money into it. That's just math.
2.62 million was the reported one on the report for Capcom for Dragon's Dogma.
What was it again?
2.62.
2.62. Okay.
I think they recently said after the April like update, they announced that Monster Hunter Rise was at 15 million. Right? And actually,
that's insane.
If you think about it, I think I put it this way: like Monster Hunter Rise has sold more than like Rebirth, 16, and like Kingdom Hearts 4 combined, or
no, there's no Kingdom Hearts 4. That's a 0.
Or Kingdom Hearts 3. Like or I'm trying to remember.
You're probably right too.
Because it's like, or maybe
You're
it's
also wrong.
so remake has sold like 7-8 million plus 2 plus 3, so that's 13 million. So yeah, basically Rise has outsold at least 3 of Square Enix's biggest games by itself, and that doesn't even
Not to mention
include
World.
Sunbreak. Yeah, and that's not even
Yeah.
talking about World, which is like twice the seller that Rise
Which
is.
outsold Rise, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's my point, is that if your ceiling of your sales is that much lower, your budgets can't compare. I mean, like, they can, but you're going to lose money, which is what happens.
Should
So
have
Yeah.
done multi-platform in the first
If
place.
you're thinking about like remakes or like reboots or whatever, like compare the sales like an FF7 rebirth to something like Resident Evil 4 remake as well, which like kind of strike in that same territory of like, hey, it's a remake of a classic game, you know, and RE4 remake is above 7 million. you know?
Yeah.
So here's something interesting. So the last bit of news we got for Armored Core 6 sales was over 2.8 million copies. Armored Core, like,
Did it
Armored Core
outsell FF7 rebirth?
I think it has.
Dude, that'd be so fucking funny if it did.
It is true. I mean,
That's
okay.
crazy. I didn't think about it like that.
Look, there's like so many things that are against Rebirth. Okay, you're making a direct sequel to the remake, which people are kind of mixed on. I do love the remake, but there's lots of people that don't want to buy it, and there's also like some people don't want to buy it until all 3 parts come out. And you also release the first part during the peak of COVID, when the game was, you know, like when everyone's like locked at home buying video games to like cope. So it's just like, you know, there's like so many factors in there.
yeah, and obviously the fact is exclusive. They're just like a high barrier of entry to play it.
Well,
Yeah,
and I don't think not only just exclusive, but we've talked about this in the past. Just no consistent exclusive strategy. Like what games did the Saga games release on versus Final Fantasy versus Harvestella versus Star Ocean? Like there's just no consistency. So it's like, I can play Octopath Traveler 1, but not 2. I can play Saga anywhere.
2 on Xbox is still nowhere to be seen. By the way,
Yeah.
They announced it and then they never.
that was supposed to come out this spring, and it's almost summer, so it's like, ugh.
You're just gonna
And
shadow
even
drop it
then,
one
like-
day, you know.
And then certain PC games are only on Epic, like Stranger Paradise and Kingdom Hearts, but other ones are available on Steam.
I am hoping I'm wrong about this, but we are almost at 6 months after Dragon Quest Monsters 3 came out on Switch. There is a chance that they just shadow drop that during the middle of Summer Games Fest. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they announce it like next week and they have a ramp up to the PC drop. But it's like, when you look at Square Enix's strategy for releases, especially ports, in the past, they just fucking dropped that shit.
Was Dragon
Don't you
Quest
have
Builders 1 shadow dropped?
Yeah.
earlier
No,
this
it
year?
wasn't. They
Or was that
they
like a
did.
week? I
That was
forget.
like 2 weeks, I think.
Okay.
So clarify me this: how does this shadow drop work? Doesn't Valve prevent you from shadow dropping your games unless you agree to it?
Something like
I
that.
don't know.
Something like that. Yeah.
Conjecture, but not know.
But man, it's like, I don't know, when it comes to Neo, it's like they're gonna blame it. It's like, oh, we release our games on multi-platform and it still failed anyways, so why are we gonna do it? But that's
Okay,
you're talking about Neo, the
so
Road to
Dragon-
Zero.
yeah. So Dragon Quest Builders PC release was announced on January 29th, and it came out on February 13th. So they gave it a 2-week head start,
They're learning.
which I believe 2 weeks is the
Minimum.
without Valve's permission, it's the minimum that you can say. Oh God.
Yeah, they definitely need to hire somebody better for their PC marketing department.
So what does Square Enix have in the pipeline, both known and leaked and conjectured? Known,
Dragon
we
Quest
have
3
Dragon Quest
HD2D. Yeah.
and 12.
So think about it like this. I believe Dragon Quest Day in Japan is like 9 to 10 days away. Because that's the end of May.
May 26th, I think.
Yeah, so whatever, if they're gonna release new news on like maybe Dragon Quest 3 HD2D, that would probably be the time they start talking about it. Because they usually that's the designated day they talk about anything and everything Dragon Quest on like what the current status is on what they're working on. Like last year was like the Dragon Quest amusement park or theme park or whatever.
In terms of like games that we know for sure are coming out this fiscal year, Saga Emerald Beyond just released. I don't know if they've said this directly, but it seems highly implied that Visions of Mana is going to come out this year, or at least before next April. Then they have
I think they
Dawntrail.
said summer. Yeah, summer.
Yeah. Oh, they did say summer. Okay, so yeah, this year. And then Dawntrail is dated. That's digital entertainment, different sub segment, and I think that's it. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Maybe a
EA
Dragon Quest X expansion. Those are the ones that are hard to track.
I think a Dragon Quest X expansion just released in March.
Ah, okay. Never mind.
So in Japan, obviously. So yeah, we know they have a lot of games like in the pipeline, but like coming out like this year. I don't blame analysts for being, a little bit concerned. Like, well, what are you selling this year? Like, where's your revenue coming from?
Do you know what I learned just yesterday about Dragon Quest X? They barely shut down the service of that game on 3DS and Wii U this past March.
Because they had to, yeah.
Yeah, it was still running on them. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that they released on it and they were still running up until that point. I'm like, holy shit. They kept it up for a long ass time.
Yeah.
Well, that was a pretty lengthy conversation on Square Enix financials, but I think it was a lot of detail. Adam and everyone did a good job in kind of parsing all the, like we said, primary sources, what was actually said, what was translated from
the last thing I'll say is that sometimes, not always, Square Enix should release like a transcript for this presentation in like middle of June. So in about a month, we might get like it'll kind of feel like an echo because it kind of is. It's like, okay, here's literally what President Takashi Kiryu said in writing, officially translated about sales and whatnot. So we might hear about this like as an echo in about a month from now.
I definitely don't want to be an issue. I feel like everything is just like problems left by like the previous like management, and it's just telling them to fix everything.
I mean, realistically, Adam, like, when do you think we start feeling the effects of this like restructure? Is like 2 to 3 years from now? We start.
It sort of feels like this medium term plan, which is a 3-year plan, which we never said, is they're calling it Square Enix Reboots and Awakens. 3 years of foundation laying for long term growth.
Okay.
So it seems like this whole 3-year plan is basically a transitionary plan. Like, all right, it almost feels like they're admitting we're not getting growth in the next 3 years, but after that, maybe. So
Square Enix remake.
Yeah, because I'm trying to, because obviously, like, restructuring and everything aside, like, what people really want out of Square Enix is like, okay, well, when are the games going to start coming out again for them? I kind of wonder like what the production schedule is like in the next 2 to 3 years of like we were just talking about like how just their current year like down the line releases aren't really like going to be hard hitters or really besides Dawntrail.
What about their like indies department? Like
that seems to have Square Enix Collective seems to have, I don't know if they were shuttered entirely, but they're at least not really a focus anymore. They're like,
yeah, I believe like part of like the restructuring like layoffs that they were talking about earlier this week is like some amount of staff of the Square Enix Collective, I don't know how much, did get affected by that. So like lesser releases like little goody two shoes, like at least from a publishing partner perspective, will probably be fewer on top of already being as few as it was.
Oof.
Yeah. So
and these things don't look good.
It's I mean, we've been talking about it for years now for Square Enix. Like they really need to figure something out, and they're kind of taking the baby steps right now of like trying to figure it out, as painful as it is for everyone involved, which sucks.
Well, changing tacks entirely. The other major news from this week is a video game announcement from Ubisoft, and that is the formal announcement of the next Assassin's Creed title, Assassin's Creed Shadows. This is the long kind of awaited Assassin's Creed set in not feudal Japan, but is it Sengoku era Japan, Warring States Japan?
Yeah.
Set in 16th century Japan, features two protagonists, the samurai Yasuke and the shinobi.
Now
Darn, I missed it. Naoe, Naoe,
Yeah.
Naoe. And then this, even though this has kind of always been the strange part about Assassin's Creed in like the last like 4 years, is that they had the pivot to the quote RPG era with Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, which we started covering. That's when we started covering Assassin's Creed on the site. Then they kind of had the pivot last year with Mirage, saying we're going back to our roots. And then for Shadows, like this is from the Odyssey team, or sorry, the Odyssey teams. So this
Yeah,
is
they have like
the
different.
RPG flavor.
There's like
again.
different flavors of Assassin's Creed now, kind of concurrent.
But it's not really formalized. Like it's just
No.
you gotta have to kind of know. Like it's not you can't really tell based
Oh.
on like if you see the game just on a store shelf or in a digital library, you just kind of have to know like what style
Well,
of game
they
is this?
they kind of
it's in the-
explicitly say when they are talking about these games what types.
well,
of
yeah,
games
it's in
they
the press
are.
release. But
But it's
yeah.
not like labeled anything special, I guess.
Yeah, it's like if you're like something to Best Buy or GameStop, it's like, oh, I want to check out a new Assassin's Creed. You don't know if you're getting like the,
Yeah.
the 20-hour tight package or the 100-hour collectathon open world style.
So Adam, as a Valhalla like alumni, this is the next one in the RPG flavored part of the series. So
Yeah, so I
clearly you're the
played
best
Assassin's Creed
person-
1.
best for the job.
I played Assassin's Creed 1, 2, 2, and 2. And
Yep.
after that, I was like, when did Assassin's Creed 2 Revelation come out? Like 2010? Something like that?
Ooh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it
the
was,
only thing I remember from
2011.
Assassin's
I think that was like 2011, 2012. For
Okay, and I was after that point. I like those games quite a bit. I think Brotherhood was my
2011.
favorite, and I was just like, all right, I've had my fill. And then I skipped.
Mhm.
I think it counts up to 7 games. Like, okay, I skipped 3, 4 Black Flag, Unity, whatever all the rest were, and then I was like, all right, let me try Valhalla. I'll come back to it, and I didn't hate the game, but I wasn't super high on it. I reviewed it. I gave it a 6.
Ooh.
And I was just like, all right, I've had my fill again, so I'm probably not going to get Shadows.
It's an absurdly huge game.
Yeah.
So,
You didn't
like,
get harassed for that 6 out of 10, did you? Because I remember
No.
Kazuma got harassed from one of the Assassin's
I think one thing that
it was like a
helped-
late review.
Yeah, I think one thing according to Alex, it actually trafficked pretty well, but I think it helped that I did review it like 6 months later. So
Yeah.
like that, that early hype window was died down. Like, but anyway, but yeah, so they have this game was actually a couple of years ago. Ubisoft kind of announced their different projects, and I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but one of them was Codename Red, which they at the time said it's the RPG flavor in Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla. And so we knew this was coming, and we knew it was set in Japan, and there was a teaser trailer and everything. So like this is the formal announcement of that. They have a couple of other games. I think the other main one that we know of is Assassin's Creed like Hex, which is set in like Salem witch trial era.
Okay.
And that's supposed to be like another smaller scale one, not the big RPG one, so we're not covering it.
So
I think that one's actually supposed to be even a little different even still. But
Mirage was even weird in itself because that was like originally planned as like a Valhalla DLC that grew in scope to become its own game.
Yep.
So,
but anyways, yeah. So Assassin's Creed Shadows comes out in November. Obviously, with anything Ubisoft, there's like a million different purchase options.
is this
you
the
can
first
get-
next gen only one or like
Yes, it
current
is.
gen one?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're it's no longer coming out for like PS4 and stuff like that.
Yep.
And
It's
then
not
yeah,
coming to
like-
Steam.
Mhm.
Ubisoft games
is,
do not come to Steam, at least not right away. Valhalla eventually made it. I think it still launches Ubisoft Connect in the background anyway, but you can buy it.
It's weird because like that new Rogue Prince of Persia game is coming to Steam, I believe. I forgot that's published by Ubisoft or not.
But the Prince of Persia Lost Crown side scroller did not.
Yeah, which is a weird decision.
Yeah.
And yeah, on top of the Ubisoft Store and Epic Game Store and PC, there's all coming to Amazon Luna, which is their cloud service.
Their
cloud
previous
gaming
games
service.
have also. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also is bringing it to Mac, but it's only for Macs with the Apple Silicon. Because, like, I guess current I guess Macs are able to run like modern games now. Like I know Capcom ported some of their titles there.
Yeah.
Like,
Also saying, oh, only for Macs with Apple Silicon doesn't really matter too much when they've been using Apple Silicon for like what 4 or 5 years now.
I mean, that's what they said in the press release. I don't know too much about like what the Mac process is at the moment, because I know there's a definitely generational cutoff of like the Macs up until this point will not play this, but Macs that are a certain model forward will play this. So,
Okay, the Apple the Apple M1 came out in November of 2020, so 3.5 years ago.
okay, so if
was it M4 now? Is it?
Yeah.
and then people can play this 3 days early if they bought the Ultimate Edition or are part of the Ubisoft Plus subscription stuff.
People like outraged for how expensive it is. It was like $150 for.
I mean, that's how. I mean, that's just modern games at this point. Like modern
AAA.
AAA releases will retail at $70. Then they have their, higher tier pricing. Ubisoft is like the one that gets like the most shit for it because they kind of lay it out plainly on their site and then are very blatant about like, hey, if you want to play this at a lower price, come subscribe to our shit. They didn't like, rightfully so. Like that's just modern gaming, so it's like this is not an Ubisoft exclusive thing.
Hey, how much does Persona 3 Reload cost if you get the digital deluxe edition and the season pass? I think it's like
free when you
$120.
buy the base game pass.
Yeah, and if Atlus laid that plainly out on their site, guess what? They would if they laid it out like Ubisoft does on their site for Persona 3 Reload. Guess what? They would probably get the same shit, or maybe less.
I think the deluxe
biased.
edition because Reload was a $70 game, and I think they had like a deluxe edition at launch, which was $100. And that honestly, most of the deluxe stuff is like costumes and like maybe some items and like
or something.
Yeah, like the cameo stuff, and like it was all kind of junk. And then after it released, they announced, "Oh, there's a season pass, which has like the episode I guess coming out along with more junk." But I think all put together at their standard prices, not on sale, it's like $120 if you get everything. So, yeah.
I guess how much like this one Ultimate Edition is? It's like around there, 120, 130. So are they all really that different in terms of pricing? Not really.
No. This is a bias, I would say.
Yeah.
At this point.
So, I watched the trailers for this, and actually I'm pretty interested in this time period and their premise. Like I played through Valhalla. I didn't do everything in it. I did reach credits. I was like, that's too much fucking game. But like,
I just want to correct myself. If you get Persona 3 Reload Digital Premium Edition with the expansion pass, it is $135.
Okay, so it's more than this game.
Yeah,
Great.
Yep.
Don't worry, the Atlus fans will always defend it.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Obviously, the argument is a lot of that stuff you don't need, but that's the same with Assassin's Creed. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and I played Assassin's Creed 1, all of the two trilogy. I didn't play 3. I played Black Flag. I didn't play through all of Unity. I played a little bit.
My experience with Assassin's Creed, I only played the first one when it was more like a stealth game, and then I said this game sucks. Buy Metal Gear Solid 4 instead, and convinced every person to play Metal Gear Solid instead, and they were all converted into Metal Gear fans. But somehow I end up being a Kojima hater after he made Death Stranding.
Nice, good job.
Yeah, Death Stranding's great. Love that game.
So. And I played, Origins, a little bit of Odyssey, not too much, and Valhalla, like I said. I'm pretty interested in the way this, everything I'm reading about this. I'm hoping to see, whenever they show gameplay, like next month, probably, how it'll shake out. But I think they have a really cool approach of like, hey, you have two main characters. One is like that, assassin-focused, stealth-focused. One is more the direct combat, because, Odyssey and Valhalla, they're not really assassin focused necessarily. You're pretty up in there in both of those guys. You're beating the shit out of people and in some form assassinating them more directly in front of them. So try to blend those two styles together and from what I read up, for any normally you'll be able to switch between any of the two protagonists here at will, whether it's you want a more direct approach with Yasuke or more stealthy approach at Naue, but they do have their personal missions or story quests that you'll be locked into them for some of those story focused quests. But for the majority of it, you can seem to just choose a character and play with them, and then they mentioned that both of these characters have their own unique skills, unique progression path, weapons, stats, to really try to make them different from the get go, as well as kind of bringing back some of that almost two trilogy esque style of like not basically like team building. They mentioned like they'll have like a spy network information system to gather intel on targets and like a customizable hideout for them. They also talked about like with the bigger outlets like IGN about like how the different seasons in the game will vary up like your options for stealth, for example, like in like winter, like when everything is like filled with snow, you might have like different stealth options available to you than like when it's like fall and everything's kind of like dried up, so forth. You might have like less places to hide because like there's like no like spring blossoms or anything to hide behind. So they've been talking about that. There's also been a little bit of confusion behind like the always online requirement because at the PlayStation Network store it says like online play or online required, online network connection required for it. The development team came out on their social feed and said that like this game won't require a mandatory connection at all times. It's only mandatory when you need to install the game, but after you install it, you can play the entire game offline.
Which tells me that the game is over 100 gigs on PS5 and they didn't want to have multiple discs.
Yeah.
They shouldn't learn how to do compression because if you played Stellar Blade, that game is only 30 gigs.
I don't know if Stellar Blade is a perfect example of that. Like, if you're just looking at these screenshots for this new Assassin's Creed and consider how big the most recent ones have been.
Think about the scope of the world.
I don't know. I just feel like
all the voice acting in all the different languages, and it's like
it's not a perfect comparison there, Chow.
Look, I play Ubisoft games before, and I always feel like they're fucking like storage bloat. Like they
okay.
have
How about this, Chow? How about FF7 Rebirth? Why didn't they just make that like 30 gigs, huh?
Wow,
huh?
They don't have the budget to. Okay.
I'm just talking about like that'd be a more probably sensible comparison. And guess what? FF7 Rebirth is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's 150 gigs, but look, my experience with Ubisoft from like their past 10 games is like they're always like 100 gigs. Always.
I mean, that's just the standard for big ass fucking games, especially when you have like when they're all trying to like support 4K as well. So that's just kind of almost inevitable, So it's kind of a weird comparison still. It's not a perfect comparison. Other than that, they haven't really said too much, like aside from like hearsay of like, hey, this is what we've been doing during development. But in terms of like actual real gameplay footage, they haven't provided that yet.
So I haven't played Origins or Odyssey, but Valhalla, the way the game was set up, I actually kind of like this, although not greatly. Was that in Valhalla, a lot of the story was like segmented. There was like 8 different sections of Britain or the British Isles that you were exploring, and each one kind of had like a separated little narrative. It all kind of hooked together in the end in a way, but really it was a little bit more vignette style in that sense. I'm kind of curious. I don't know if Origins was the same or if Odyssey was the same, and I don't know if this will be similar, where like different regions in Japan will have kind of little different storylines. And then of course there's always going to be some there's always going to be some batshit ancient race of alien gods.
Absolutely guaranteed.
Like I want to say like Valhalla ends up with like your character's brother getting like possessed by an alien god or something, and which is actually like some futurific society, and he gets his spine implanted by some robot. I don't know.
You're fighting a gas station attendant in this one. Don't worry.
Historical accuracy. Name of the game.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm actually pretty interested in like, I'm willing to give them a shot of like, hey, show me the game, and them talking about like, hey, like the stealth in this one, they're gonna have like actual like light sources that you can put out, like Splinter Cell style. Like if you really need to make more shadows for yourself to break up chase sequences more easily, it's like okay, all right, you seem to be very ambitious with this. I like the time period. I like the premise that you're setting up. Just show me the game. We'll go from there.
I remember back when like Assassin's Creed 3 was launching or whatever, and it became more obvious that like each Assassin's Creed would be like a different time period. Of course, one time period that a lot of people were interested in was do Japan or like feudal Japan, whatever. I'm actually kind of surprised that they held off for like 12 games or whatever it is. They held some restraint before jumping straight to Japan.
I'm kind of bummed out that like they're doing the thing where like some of those like requested time periods are like relegated to like the one that's set in China as like as a mobile game,
Yeah.
for example, which is kind of a bummer. But I'm hoping for the best for this one. I mean, I feel like we're in the era of like fucking samurai games, dude. You have Rise of the Ronin, Ghost of Tsushima PC.
Yep.
So I there was like another samurai game that was in my head that I totally forgot already.
Those are the two I was thinking
I
of.
feel like
Because those came out
Neo
last month.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Samurai Warriors 4 DX.
Oh yeah, just came out of
Shadow
nowhere.
Drop. Yeah,
It's way too expensive. Okay, I'm not spending $60 on this.
it's 50. So there you go.
Look, I'm Canadian. Okay, it's like
Oh,
65.
okay, that's right. Yeah,
I'm Canadian. Okay.
I mean it makes sense. It's more expensive there. I forgot to consider the Canadian factor here.
But I look at that price, like nope.
Yeah. Well, it'll go down in price with the Steam. I almost bought it on the spot because I really like Samurai Warriors.
I can't believe they charge this much for a game that's considered retro.
Welcome to Koei Tecmo when they fucking shadow drop things on PC from their back catalog.
Okay, we have a few other smaller updates before we go into our sales and date rundown. This update is for the game we've mentioned. We probably should have paired this with the earlier conversation about Dawntrail and Square Enix. So obviously, Dawntrail is coming out in a month, late June, early July, and as part of the ramp up to that release, Square Enix has released the new Job Actions trailer for Dawntrail. So Chow and James, for those of us that don't play Final Fantasy XIV, can you give us kind of like the cliff notes on like what the big overarching changes are? Because obviously going into the minutia of how each job changes might not be the best use of time, but like, is there any like clear theme for like how they're updating
Not
like the job traits and skills?
nothing that you would really easily be able to tell from just watching the Job Actions trailer. Like some of the stuff from the live letter gave us an idea of some of the changes. Like Astrologian is getting yet another fucking rework.
They can never decide what that class will do.
Yeah, it's like it was in a good enough spot by the end of Shadowbringers, and then they got rid of sleeve draw, and it's like just stop. Stop.
The class just becomes so streamlined to a point that it's like like
well, streamlined, but also with no sleeve draw. It just like absolutely
it has like no personal identity.
No, that not even that. Just sleeve draw. It just like limits what. Just doesn't feel good to play. Hopefully, this rework feels good, even though I miss End of Shadowbringers Astrologian. But beyond that, like it's too early to say. And I think Chow and I are probably on the same page where they've outright said, we're not changing things too much this time. We're going to focus more on class identity with the next expansion, which is wild that they just said that.
But yeah, you wouldn't get much from this trailer. It just shows you like the animation of all the attacks, and it's like unless you're playing the game, you really don't know what these things do. Really,
Warrior got yet another Fell Cleave.
How many Fell Cleaves do they need?
Okay, so as of Endwalker, we had Fell Cleave, Feller Cleave, and Fellis Cleave, and now we have to go even further beyond.
Fellerist.
Yeah, but
literally
just turns your entire axe huge for a moment and just slams it. It looks so goofy, but that's perfect for Warrior. That's one job that nobody's complaining about right now. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I just basically skimmed through this trailer because I think the last time I think they showed this was do you remember the Endwalker version? And everyone bitched so hard about the Scholar.
Yeah.
But the animation that they show is like they run faster, and this is the scholar's ability, and everyone start to like rage, and Yoshi P is like, "How dare you do this to the scholar?" And when the game released, that make you run faster ability is like the ultimate ability that it had to be like nerfed a couple patches later. It was just like so good, fucking expedient. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man. But yeah, unless you really are hardcore into FF14, this trailer is kind of pointless, or unless you just want to see how the attacks look.
Yeah, and even if you are hardcore into 14, you have to be a specific type of 14 player to even really gather too much from it. But yeah, it's Dawntrail is, like you said, it's out in a little more than a month. We should have more information as we get closer to launch about like specific stuff. So yeah.
No, at least I'm glad at least we brought it up so I can learn about Fellist Cleave.
That's not their actual names, but it's what everyone calls them.
Yeah.
Can't wait for Feller Blade.
Jesus.
One of the other trailers we got, I kind of mentioned very briefly way at the start of this podcast, a new trailer for Greedfall II, The Dying World. So we learned in March that this game, obviously being developed by Spiders, published by Nacon, whatever it is, the French peoples, is coming out in early access some point this year, which is kind of an interesting thought, but obviously a lot of games have exercised that to success. So we got a new trailer which focuses on the story of the game, and I'm gonna screw this up. The Doneigada, which is because in this game you play as a native character in the island, which before was the location of the first game that you visited as a quote unquote European character. So it kind of goes into that and how that will look with a little bit of gameplay snippets there. This is our first real look at the new UI and the new combat, which looks
It's much more tactical.
yeah, it looks slower. The UI it almost looks like temporary. I don't know what the word is, like placeholder, that's the word. But then I went back to watch some gameplay of the original Greedfall, and its UI is also it looks almost placeholder. So like, okay, maybe that's what they're going with. More interesting here, other than this trailer, because this trailer is only about a minute long, and about 15 seconds of that is gameplay. So there's not a ton to latch onto there. But they did show also an early access roadmap, which seems on its face useful. Like, okay, here's what you're going to get with early access. Here's what we're going to work on. But it doesn't really tell that much. It says with early access. Oh, I guess they do say in summer. So I guess that's our first release window other than 2024. Early access is sometime this summer. You'll get your first couple chapters of the main quest. Okay, that makes sense. You'll get the first companions. Okay, that makes sense. Your first locations. Okay, that makes sense. Future updates, new regions, new companions, new quests, new skills, new options, and much more.
Future
So
updates
they
are
don't-
gonna add the rest of the game.
Yeah, so basically, I think this could have been good. Like they could have detailed like if there's a little bit more meat on this bone, but they basically just say like we'll give you the start of the game, and then in future updates, without any timetable attached, we will give you more of the game. It's like okay, I could have guessed that. Like you didn't need this roadmap graphic to tell me this. I could have gleaned that. From
Is
the
it
fact that
better
it's
or
like,
worse than the Cyberpunk roadmap that we saw?
it's half notch better.
Yeah, the
'Cause
Cyberpunk
at
roadmap,
least
what was it? Just continual updates and improvements for 9 months?
yeah, like
Okay.
this one at least has 5 separate bullets to say
Okay.
regions, companions, quests. But yeah, obviously, like we talked about Greedfall, it feels like forever ago, 2019. Uh, it felt really like Spiders finally getting their feet under them, but now they're under a different publisher. Uh, they also did that Souls-like, right?
They
Is that
did
the
Steel
same
Rising,
developer?
yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of it didn't really feel like it made a big splash, but of
It
course that was
was
a different
just
style of game and
thoroughly
on
okay. It was fine.
yeah, so like maybe early access is the best thing for Spiders because their main like drawback was the lack of polish. So maybe this will give them the opportunity to do that. But also because of Greedfall 2 was one of those, or sorry, Greedfall 1 was one of those games where it was like, if you look past the jank, quote unquote, it had some really ambitious, good ideas. That makes me not eager to like jump in at early access. Like, all right, let's smooth out as much of the jank as possible, and then I will jump in. Like we talk about, do you or do you not jump in at early access? Just based on the pedigree of Spiders, I'm excited for Greedfall 2 at its full release. I'm not excited for early access, but
I mean, it's
maybe.
probably a good thing that they're doing early access to iron it out to full release. So hopefully, like
Well,
this
yeah,
thing a full
that's kind of
release.
the thesis I was getting
Yeah,
at.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe stated poorly, but yeah, I'm
No, I got
excited,
you.
but just not excited specifically for early access. They could tell me this is just releasing tomorrow. I'd be like, I'll see the word of mouth and probably still wait because there's enough to play. Just in the era of there being so many quality releases from studios big and small, we talked about shadow dropping. Please stop shadow dropping. Like I feel like 15 years ago, shadow dropping was like this really cool idea, and now it's kind of like, please don't shadow drop. Or if you're gonna shadow drop the early access like Hades did, um, rather than the full release or the PC port, because then you're just sending your
Also,
game out to die.
also, Hades 2 wasn't even a proper shadow drop because they had the technical test like a week and a half earlier.
That's true. Yeah.
And they said
Yeah.
like early access coming really soon, so they were teasing it.
Yeah. So not
Versus
quite a
like
shadow
Square
drop.
Enix doesn't not say anything, and then all of a sudden, bam! Here's Dragon Quest Treasures.
They intrinsically trust their audience to know that it's really soon, but really soon being either tomorrow or like a year from now. Thank you, Square Enix.
We got another new trailer for the recently announced SteamWorld Heist 2. This is the story deep dive trailer. But even though it's a story trailer, it has a fair bit of length to it and does show a fair bit of gameplay as well. So it's kind of a pretty comprehensive trailer, showing some of the overworld navigation, some of the side-scrolling elements, and of course, story elements as well.
Yeah, I think the only real concern I have is like it's kind of this shift of like, hey, instead of going from stage to stage to stage and like in a faster succession, you kind of have this world map now with like a fog of war style, and covering the map to like get to new missions and stuff. So I mean, I know they're placing a lot of focus on like, hey, you can customize your ship and like go from place to place because there's gonna be overworld enemies. I'm just hoping that like that doesn't like break up like the tight pace of like the first game did. I really like going from stage to stage, and now this one's like, hey, you have an overworld map to get from stages. It's like, okay, hopefully it doesn't take too long to get from stage to stage. I know a lot of it's kind of like old man yelling at the clouds of like, like how Adam and I really like menu based navigation to get from place to place really fast instead of like having a town hub to like engage with like basic things that could have been
Well, you
faster
don't
from
like
a menu.
Somniel?
I wasn't gonna say it. But it's kind of funny because I look at the gameplay of the overworld map. It reminds me of like I watched a stream of someone playing through Waterworld on the Super Nintendo the other day. Oh yeah, fuck. And it reminds me of that.
The last bit of news before we get into sales actually involves one of the upcoming dates. Oop, I screwed up our outline here. Obviously, one of the big releases that has been in the middle of its media blitz for a while now is the upcoming summer release of Shin Megami Tensei V. I almost said Apocalypse. Vengeance. So Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance is coming out on June 14th, and we've talked about in multiple occasions what that's adding. Obviously, it's multi-platform now. The new story route, etc. Here's one thing that we didn't expect, and I don't think we've seen it from Atlus before, is that the base Shin Megami Tensei V, which of course released in late 2021 as a Switch exclusive, is going to be delisted on the day before Vengeance's release on June 13th, including all of its DLC. So once Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance releases multi-platform in June, it will not be possible to purchase either the base game Shin Megami Tensei V or DLC if you own the base game for Shin Megami Tensei V. They're trying to this is not explicitly stated, but is all but, just inferred that trying to move all purchases to the new version of the game, which
To me, I wonder if there's like some weird like legal agreement here with Nintendo or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Ah.
It's worth mentioning that like you can go to PSN right now and buy Persona 5, not Royal. You can just buy the
Yeah.
original Persona 5.
Yeah, it's like it's at a lower MSRP also,
Yeah,
and
it's $20 versus 50 or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like for me, I thought that would just be the way to go. It's like okay, like to me, I thought they were just gonna like lower the MSRP of like this base game and still have it be purchasable. Like I understand, like they're worried that like consumers might get confused of like which version do I buy? They might buy SMT5 Vengeance and then still get like the base game's DLC because they don't know. I can understand that reasoning behind it, but I think from a preservation standpoint, I think, and even just like there's like a use case scenario of like, hey, maybe someone sees SMT5 on the shelf for like $5, like 2 to 3 years from now, and like buys that physical copy, and then they can't buy like any of the DLC, or like maybe even get like the Japanese voices for it because that was free DLC in the West, because they've all been delisted, stuff like use cases like that. It's like that sucks, that they didn't even get the option to like expand the game that they just bought, because they saw it at a lower price. There's all kind of like there's it sucks for me. Like for me, I kind of am a little bit negative about this because I understand that you can play the entire original Shin Megami Tensei V in Vengeance, and and a lot of DLC that came out for that. But it's also not going to be intrinsically the same experience as well, in the same because like there's so many gameplay like battle system adjustments and changes that like what if you just wanted to see like just from a historical educational standpoint, like, oh, what was the original nature of this game? It's like Atlus is very quick to like, oh no, you don't want to see that original game. Don't-
I know it's not
Rewrite
quite the
history
same.
books.
I know it's not quite the same, but I actually know a few people, and me included, who played Persona 3 Portable on Steam before playing
Yeah.
Reload. Like, I
Yeah,
know it's not quite the same because
exactly.
that's more of a, not just an enhanced version, but like a brand new version. But still, the fact that the option is there, that we can play two different versions of the game. So,
Yeah, there's also like a version of Persona 5 that's like there's subsystems that were introduced in 5 Royal that weren't in 5, so like you kind of have both like a different gameplay experience because of like some of those mechanics not being in there, and two, like some people do prefer the difficulty of the original Persona 5 because the higher difficulties in Royal were just stupidly easy. Still, you really had no challenge
yeah,
in
Royal
Royal
makes a
on
ton of,
5.
adds a ton of conveniences, almost too many.
Yeah, So like to me, like the the logical conclusion because of what they did in Persona 5 was like they'll keep on selling the base game at a lower MSRP, so therefore everyone wins, and so delisting this is just like I don't know, man. Like I hope that legal agreement with Nintendo is like actually the case, and if it's not, then this is ugh, I don't like it. I understand why, but I don't
And
like
then
it.
sometimes less is more. Like, I don't like this idea, like, well, they added more stuff to Vengeance, so it's clearly the definitive version of the game. It's like, well, some people prefer the theatrical versions of Lord of the Rings movies, and they can go back and watch those because
Yeah,
not everything they added was for the benefit of the product. And that could be the same here, where like in 10 years, if someone's playing through a backlog or catching up on Persona titles, like they should have the option to play, or sorry, not Persona titles, Shin Megami Tensei titles, like play the game as it originally released in 2021. But now it's just literally like they don't have an option. Just go to the new stuff. It's got everything added in and all the, I don't know. It feels like I know we try to give devil's advocate and say, well, maybe it's an agreement that we're not privy to between the publisher and the platform holder. But regardless, the outcome is the outcome, and it kind of stinks.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, we'll go through the final rundown here for sales and release dates. This one we kind of touched on in the Square Enix talk, but Monster Hunter, Capcom released their financials also within the last couple of weeks, and specifically talking about the Monster Hunter series and Monster Hunter Rise, the whole series has passed 100 million sales. And I know I don't have the number in front of me, but it's very backloaded. It is a growing series ever since the release of World. Like out of those 100 million sales, the plurality of it is World and Rise.
Yeah.
So
The majority of it is actually because
right.
they, for unit sales, they count expansion sales, which fair enough. But if you consider the fact that, like, I believe for for base game World, it's 25 million. Base game Rise, it's 15 million. Sunbreak, it's like what? It's like 8 or 9 million, and like Iceborne, I know, is over 10 million. So it's like overall, like just those two games and their expansions is like almost 2/3 of that number.
Yeah. And then Monster Hunter Rise, like you said, 15 million. Monster Hunter World, 25. Like, obviously, a series with a ton of momentum going into Wilds. It'll be interesting to see like how that does as a multi-platform next generation release for the series.
Does
Monster
this
Hunter
also
15.
count like spin-offs like stories as part of this number?
I assume
Maybe.
so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess I shouldn't just assume.
Okay.
It's
I mean,
I'm looking at the press release to see what if it specifically states it.
oh man, I know we bring this up, but like, okay, first month predictions of like how much Wilds will sell in its first month.
6 million.
6 million.
Minimum 10 million.
Minimum 10 million.
Minimum
Okay.
10 million.
Okay. Yeah.
The
I
reason
don't
I say that is that I believe the sales for World was like something like over 5 million in like a week.
know.
And that was without a PC version and without the growth that the series has had since.
And then now with Wilds presumably being, multi-platform day and date with PC simultaneous. Presumably, we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But it's already like announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC from the get go.
Yep.
And I have to imagine depending on like what the new Switch specs are going to be, like the successor, I'm sure they're going to be eyeing that as well because if you get that onto the Switch successor, oh,
Yeah.
that's cross-play. Holy shit!
Yeah, I still don't think necessarily it'll be on the Switch successor because I think they're probably just going to have the Rise team make something for it. But
Yeah.
I'm sure if it's feasible at all, they're going to do it because Capcom ain't dumb. If they think they can do it, they'll do it.
Yeah. Well, Brian, we're gonna try our best to get it to the day one servers on Wilds, and then getting connection errors. Then we try to link up.
It's okay. We'll just request multiple codes.
Just bypass the crowd. That's right.
I mean, that's what we did with Sunbreak. So I mean, like genuinely, I
Yeah.
assume that's what we'll do, and it makes sense.
Into the release date rundown to close out this podcast. For May, we have the dungeon crawler Witch and Lilies will enter early access on May 24th. James, you had played this game in a preview opportunity once before, right?
It was at TGS.
Okay, cool. So yeah, PC exclusive going into early access later in the month.
Okay. Oh, actually, the early access blurb has finally been uploaded to the Steam page, so I actually can tell what's going on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Because when they first announced this on the early access blurb, like it was blank. It was totally blank.
Yeah.
On the early access.
So I'll just read this here. Breaking news. Why early access? We want to enhance the final quality of the game by receiving feedback from everyone. In a dungeon RPG, both game balance and user experience contribute significantly to the experience, so we believe that fine-tuning both aspects is crucial. We're also embarking on a new challenge by incorporating a new element of romance between characters while effectively merging it with the classic dungeon RPG. In order to get feedback from the community, we decided to release Witch and Lilies as an early access title to further develop it into a more captivating Yuri dungeon RPG.
Yuri dungeon RPG. I like that.
While there may be issues and areas for improvement, we're committed to making the game better by taking in everyone's feedback. We sincerely ask for your help and input to make this game the best it can be. Approximately how long will this game be in early access? Plan to last approximately 1 year. Okay. And how is the full version planned to differ from the early access version? Early access, you can play most parts of the game, but we have planned the following changes: adjusting game balance, improving bug fixes, enhancing usability and UI comfort, addition of monsters, addition of weapons, equipment, and items, enhancement of combat presentation aspects such as brushing up effects and adding voices for enemy characters.
We can summarize like the rest of these too. Like, so the current state of the of early access right now. It's
okay.
You have the entire game's main story in this early access version.
Okay, you can. So I'm guessing that they're probably gonna have the main story, considering they're still adding in monsters and equipment. There's going to be post-game stuff. Most dungeon RPGs do, and I'm assuming that's not going to be in the early access and is going to be added after the fact, which makes sense because if you're trying to focus on like making things like balanced and polished, usually the post-game stuff in a DRPG is when that's most crucial. So that makes sense.
So the early access is going to be priced at $24.99 US dollars. and 3480 yen. But they mentioned in their early access that they do plan to increase the price once they officially release.
Which is standard, which is pretty standard.
So yeah, that's once again another early access indie RPG coming out of nowhere in May. I mean, we've known about this, but like we didn't know the May release date up until this point.
Yeah.
Hopefully it shapes up to be like you had a really great positive first impression of it,
Yeah.
James, over at TGS. So we'll see how that shakes out. Best of luck to that team. It seems to be, seems to be really good. Like I really like the contrast between like the Yuri designs between like the gorish horrific monster designs. The very cutesy character designs versus like, oh god, what are these these monster designs?
Just like Made in Abyss, right?
A little.
Like this one monster design from the Steam page is like, oh gosh, that's striking. Like this one, Jesus.
Oh yeah, the one that like it looks like a
beholder, but it's a bunch of people like naked people fused together. It's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, it's very normal.
Yeah.
Like that boss in Symphony of the Night, that's just a bunch of corpses like balled
Legion.
together.
Legion.
and then it's only just got a beholder eye in the middle of it.
Yeah, and then for Chow here, they did have like the Japanese voice cast as part of the press release, and then you'll have some notable names like Ikumi Hasegawa as like your main rivals VA.
It's our Lena from '86 right there.
So you can go check that out for people who are interested though with the Japanese voice cast. They had that as part of their press release.
No new updates for June. In July, we have the release date for the Switch port for Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus. We knew this was coming in the summer, but we now have a date of July 25th. And this is the version of the game that will come with a completely revamped localization, helmed by previous members of the Geofront team that did the fan translation for the Crossbell series, and then eventually got rolled into Nice America's release of those games in the later years. So pretty exciting for Falcom fans. In August, we have this was an announcement that Kite covered on the site for a new title called Kamibako Mythology of the Cube, and I didn't know what this was until I saw a response to our tweet on it, like, and it said, "Dark Cloud fans, we're eating good." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" Because it has some similar ideas about a world that needs to be restored. Where the protagonist can help rebuild the world that's been kind of fragmented in a way. So it's like, I don't know, it has some like Dark Cloud vibes to it.
More games should have Georama.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
It has.
Go for it.
I was gonna say it has been announced that it'll be this is planned for a global release, not a simultaneous release, but eventually we'll have a global release. But it will be launching first in Japanese for console on August 29th. Or actually, no, that according to Kite's post, that includes the Steam release. So maybe they'll do the thing where they update the Steam release after launch with the English version of the game.
Go check. I think that's the case. Yeah.
If you go to the
does have
Steam
a Steam
page,
listing.
it says English language not supported. So
yeah, so it might be just coming at a later date.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, again, that's Kamibako Mythology of the Cube. Publisher is Gravity Game Arise. I guess it's self-published. That's the developer as well. So I got an announcement trailer up on the site. Kind of a pretty interesting idea. And like I said, the idea is it's kind of an action RPG world build sim, kind of in that Dark Cloud realm.
So there's always a weird one because Gravity Game Arise is also developing and public. No, that's I think that's a different Gravity. I have no idea. I didn't think about Ragnarok, but later this month they're also developing and publishing a game called Tokyo Psychodemic on Steam, and that's like an adventure visual novel style. It looks really cool. I've had my eye on it. They say on this page that English language is not supported, but they've released a demo before that had English support for it, and even in the screenshots for the page, you see English subtitles and an English interface for it. But I have no idea if that game will release and it'll have English. I assume it will because of the screenshots and because of a previous demo had it. So I have no idea. So I wonder if there's a similar situation or not, based on that example, that case.
Yeah, I don't know either. Going into September, an Italian indie Souls-like, Enotria: The Last Song. We originally talked about this game because it was originally planned to release in June, but then within the same week or the week after, it was announced that that's when the Elden Ring DLC would drop. So the team at JAMA Games basically said, "Well, we'll announce a new release date later." This is they interestingly kept the announcement exclusive to their Discord channel, even though obviously people just found it in there and reported it out of there. So it was interesting. Uh, so the team at JAMA Games has announced that Enotria: The Last Song will be releasing on September 29th. Interestingly enough, the
September
Xbox
19.
yeah, September 19th. 19. What did I say? 29.
Yeah.
19th.
It was weird because
Uh,
they originally announced it for Xbox alongside other consoles, and then they were like, "Sorry, we can't release it for Xbox," and they had like a long apology letter, and now it's like, actually, yeah, it's coming to Xbox. It's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but when they announced the new August 21 launch date before the September 19 one, like you had the CEO, I believe, of Java Games like wrote like a whole paragraph apology letter of like the Xbox version being dropped, until it was like re-announced or reconfirmed to come out for that now. It's just
Yeah.
it was really weird. It was very
Yeah,
weird.
apparently another wrinkle to that was that it was like it showed off, it was showed off at like an ID at Xbox stream as one of its first showcases. So that was the main reason why a lot of Xbox fans were especially pissed, because it's like, okay, so you take the free marketing from being a game coming to Xbox and then you cancel the Xbox version. What the fuck's wrong with you? Which, fair enough. I can understand why that would piss fans off.
Yeah. But the actual like 15-minute gameplay overview, if you actually like go through that and like give it a chance to like watch it, they do a damn good job like breaking down all of the gameplay systems that they're bringing to this game, like what kind of um what unique ideas they have on the table compared to other Souls likes in recent years. And they have like this whole like, hey, you can kind of switch between three loadouts on the fly, like just three completely different loadouts with like different masks, because like the mask system grants you unique abilities with like different weapons and other stuff. You can like just with a press of a button switch like different loadouts. And also they have like this they have this kind of branching skill tree that looks a little complex, and they call it the Path of Innovators. System. It is like, I'm thinking Path of Exile. Obviously, it's not as complex as Path of Exile, but I just thought the naming scheme of that was pretty funny.
I just think
Yeah.
of Gundam 00 Innovators.
No, yeah. And they really like stress like they've done a lot of like research on like Italian legends and folklore to like really bring that to life in this game. And I really gotta commend them. Like, hey, they're really trying their best. You can tell that this is a passion project for them, and they're trying to put their best foot forward, like announcing this 8-hour demo coming on May 2022 for PS5 and PC, and hoping people will give it a chance on that front, providing a very meaty demo. So I kind of rooting for this team because they kind of feel like the underdogs in this situation. I hope like the game is good. It does look pretty good from what they've shown off in this trailer.
So does this recover all like that bad will that they did, like from that whole cancellation thing that they did? You think?
Maybe, but I think Xbox fans have bigger problems to worry about right now.
Yeah, um, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but hopefully this finds an audience, and they like, I'm hoping they find like a similar type of success that like Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen found.
and I don't think we mentioned this, but they also announced that later in May they'll have an 8-hour demo
Yeah,
available on
Josh
PC and
mentioned that.
PlayStation, and not.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, okay, sorry,
yeah,
and not
yeah,
on Xbox for the demo. So
Yeah.
okay,
yeah. But I mean, for anyone who's like remotely interested in this, I definitely recommend going to that 15-minute gameplay overview, and they do a pretty damn good job establishing a lot of like what that game is.
In late in the summer, in mid-September, we have a oh, sorry, I don't know why I said mid-September. Just late summer. We only know the summer window. We'll have the release of the remake of Sword of the Necromancer Resurrection, which was originally a stretch goal for the Kickstarter of the sequel. I think I have that right.
So yeah, yeah. So
Thank you.
this is a weird one. Yeah. So there's a 3D remake of a 2021 action RPG called Sword of the Necromancer, and this is called Sword of the Necromancer Resurrection. And like you said, this was originally a stretch goal for the Sword of the Necromancer Revenant Kickstarter. So I like the Kickstarter there. You know, it was very successful. And as part of the stretch goals, there was this 3D remake for the original game. So this 3D remake is coming out for basically everything. You know, all PlayStation, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. In late summer, and because it's kind of grown in scope in terms of like there's no longer just a stretch goal. There's like just a full blown like whole ass project on its own, to the point that like to give the development team more time with Revenant, the sequel, they're gonna prioritize releasing this first, so they get as much time as possible in developing Revenant. So that's kind of like the weird like history behind this game. And then the original game itself that released in 2021 was like kind of like a top-down 2D pixel art game. Still like an action RPG-esque. While this is like a full like 3D remake of that game. Same core story of like you take control of a character named Tama. She wants to resurrect her dead lover named Coco. And then you have to go deeper and deeper into this dungeon to power up this Sword of the Necromancer, to give it enough power to revive Coco again. And along the way, this Sword of the Necromancer can like resurrect like dead, defeated monsters. So you can have a sort of like an army of monsters that you can control as you're playing through the game, going deeper and deeper into this dungeon. So that's kind of the whole idea behind this 3D remake, and why they're doing this, and also like this 3D remake will incorporate some of the gameplay elements and advancements that the yet to be released Revenant sequel is doing. Yeah, it's kind of a weird project, but hopefully that makes sense.
I think it makes sense that they kind of implemented some new ideas in the sequel that it's in a way kind of not backporting, but like implementing those ideas into the first game in the form of a remake.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Moving on.
this looks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it does look pretty neat. And I remembered like covering the sequel like teaser trailer back in the day. So it's like
Yeah. The last time they mentioned it was like in December 2022, so it's been a while.
Later in September, we have a release date for the Western release of the Furyu and Nice American game Reynatis.
We actually had this announcement last week. This is kind of just silly.
It's just they go for it, Adam. You can do it.
Basically, last week we had a simultaneous announcement. We already talked about this on the podcast. Brian wasn't here.
I apologize.
Yeah, the Japanese side announced that there's going to be a crossover between Reynatis, the upcoming Furyu RPG, and Neo: The World Ends With You from Square Enix. So that's strange, not unexpected. I mean, it was the April Fool's joke. We already talked about this. And then at the time, the simultaneous announcement was that NAS America announced in the West, this is coming out on September 27th. But they basically said, we don't have a trailer yet. Like, they didn't have a trailer. They just said, here's the date. And so this week's update is, here's the trailer. And it's actually not just like the crossover trailer. It's just an overall, just general trailer of the game with a very small tease of the crossover content. So it almost feels like they were late. Like, okay, we announced the release date last week. Here's the trailer that announces it now.
If there's anything, the real news for this game this week was like, I guess they, of course, naturally, because they are doing a crossover, Neo: The World Ends With You, they have to get in touch with the staff with that game. So they met up with Nomura about, Reynatis, and Nomura basically gave Reynatis, his blessing of like, being the not so subtle spiritual successor to Versus 13. So now, because it has Nomura's blessing, a lot of that fan crowd for Nomura is like, maybe you should go check out Reynatis then, because Nomura gave his blessing to it.
All my friends that are like super into Nomura were like on the fence about this, and now it's like, well, even if this game is shit, I have to buy it.
It's so silly. Like, because our Lord and Savior Nomura acknowledged this game, we have to support it now. It's
Nomura like seals approval.
You can just, think for yourself and see if you want to get it or not. It's like, no, my favorite person has to give his blessing on it. Like, okay, well, that's what it'll take. That's the state of things.
These are a little bit more nebulous for the last few headlines here. But we do have that Neptunia Game Maker Re-Evolution will be launching for Xbox Series at some point in 2024.
It's
We already talked about how Sisters vs. Sisters is coming out for Xbox in just a couple days.
Wow, Brian. What was the name of this game?
Neptunia Game Maker Re-Evolution?
Re-Evolution?
It's
R
Evolution.
I thought it was RE colon evolution, but no, it's just R colon.
It's R colon evolution.
Yeah.
This is very important, obviously.
Someday we'll get the real Neptunia expert in here.
The real Neptunia expert.
Yeah, if you're a Neptunia fan, sorry that we cannot service.
Yeah, just phone in when you get a phone service in. We'll call you.
just taking a caller and Josh changes his voice a bit.
Yeah, voice changer.
Console port for Bleak Faith Forsaken, which released early last year on PC, is coming at some point this year. So that'll be launching on PlayStation and Xbox for that Souls-like. No date, but at some point.
This is one of those Souls-like I just lost track of. Like,
oh no, because we have a trailer linked in the news post.
Definitely gotten to the point where it's like a new indie game has announced that they're Souls-like and they're going to release an X date. It's like just kind of my eyes just kind of glaze over at this point. There's so many of them.
Yeah.
Look, man, we're only human. We can only cover so many games.
The reason why I was confused about this trailer is because this is a known quantity. This game released on PC last March. And then they're calling the console trailer a teaser trailer. I'm like, is it really a teaser at that point? Like,
it was funny.
It gets really weird because of go for it, James.
It was funny because I remember, like, when I was covering this, I looked at the press kit. It's like, oh, there's new screenshots, and I looked closer at them. It's like, these are just the same screenshots we had for the PC version. I am not downloading these.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the same thing, definitely not. But like Iyuden and I always get amused by this when they call it a teaser trailer. When an indie developer finds a new publisher, or like they have to switch publishers or something, so that publisher has to publish like a very old trailer now with their logo, and then they call it the teaser trailer or the publisher announcement trailer, and it's still the same trailer that's been previously released, and it's like, all right, okay, they're just the video landscape now. There's too many fucking projects and publisher switch ups and things that like publishers that are like rebranded or renamed or refolded into something, and it's
or releasing the same trailer because a game is not Xbox exclusive. Actually,
yeah, yep. Who'd have thunk?
And speaking of single player Souls-like, we have a Deathbound, not to be confused with all the other ones. Will be releasing on PlayStation and Xbox in addition to PC at some point in.
But this one is different because it's a party-based Souls-like.
Yeah,
that's what they say.
Explain this to me. It's a single player party-based. So like like a true JRPG. So AI party clearly.
So this is what the press release says: party system. The essences you absorb form your party. Deathbound features a robust party system that allows you to craft a playstyle through talent trees, switch between fallen warriors to harness their skills and abilities. Each party member's affiliation in life will affect their synergy in death. That clears it up. Not really.
I don't know, man. I don't.
We'll keep an eye
Sure.
on it, I suppose.
I mean, they say it's bind with fallen warriors found throughout the world and dynamically transform between each character seamlessly mid combat.
So it's not really like a party. It's like different.
So basically, you have the same model switching between different souls for hero souls-like party system. So they're classifying the party system as like in this game as like your one model switching between 4 different party members.
So this is like Jack Garland switching between his 2 different classes.
Yes, there we go. I think that's what they're getting at.
Okay.
Because they're saying that they share a single vessel in this press release. So I think that's the closest we'll get. I think Deathbound. I think of Gunbound. And remember Gunbound, Chow?
Yeah, I remember. I used that bot that looks like a spider where it shoots from its back. I think it's called a knack or something.
I used the Wizard one. I think it was called the Wizard. And it had like when you fire it, it had like the dual strand that looks like DNA.
Yeah, I definitely know that one.
Yeah.
The other one I use is the grub, the one that looks like a caterpillar.
Oh yeah.
God.
Gunbound was so scummy, man, but it was a cool game.
You know, that game was good until they made it pay to win. I don't know how you made pay to win in a competitive setting, and they thought it was a good thing.
We had a good thing going with Gunbound, you know.
Fucking ruined by greed.
Well, that covers all of our headlines for this episode of the Tetracast. So thanks for having me back. And May has been surprisingly packed, especially on like the indie and AA front. I'm not 100% sure what we'll be talking about next week. Obviously, we talked about Paper Mario's remake is coming out, Wuthering Waves, which I know is like a 30 million pre-registration.
The Genshin killer. Shao saying.
Sorry, I'm not participating.
I don't know.
In another chat I'm in, a friend of mine who's pretty well in tune with games and stuff had never heard of Wuthering Waves, and he saw a headline like Wuthering Waves has surpassed 30 million pre-registrations or whatever it was, and his response was, or he was like, "Wuthering what has gotten how many pre-registrations?" Like he had never heard of it.
I feel like the game is just a bunch of like disgruntled Genshin players.
I feel like I at least have to try it out and see what it is. Like I'm a person that's like seeing is believing, so I might just like boot up fucking Epic Game Store and download it and give it a shot.
Oh, is it Epic exclusive?
I don't know if it's Epic. Like for
so.
PC, on PC they had a beta test that had like its own separate PC launcher like Genshin, and I don't know if that's like that's going to be like also going to carry over to the full release, or if it's only going to be Epic Game Store exclusive.
Yeah, right now it is only Epic. Yeah.
Well, is it Epic Plus like self launcher or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking, but I'm not 100% sure.
You can get Honkai Star Rail on Epic.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can get Genshin on Epic.
I think
you can.
I think you can. Yeah.
Okay. So those are also games that are like on Epic or their publisher launcher, but not on Steam. So,
right.
But yeah, my thing with Genshin is like, okay, I put a lot of time and money on this game. It's like I'm not just gonna suddenly switch over to a different game and for the same gameplay loop, basically.
But they said it's the Genshin killer, though.
And then you're telling me to invest my time and money again? Hard chance. I'm sorry. I know it might be better in a lot of ways, have a better gacha system and all this, and you're like,
I'll try it out. I'll be like, I'm stupid enough to try out maybe a cool game. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Really.
Look, I tried out a gacha game just yesterday. It's called Gakuen Idolmaster.
And
and it was not a rhythm game.
I think it's like a raising game, right? Like a raising sim. It's like
I have a screenshot. I have a screenshot where it's like I am raising this girl, and I was telling her about the Sengoku period.
Okay.
To make her sing better.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, so from my understanding, it's like Idly Project. I think it's like a simulator style. Like,
it's like I have no idea what I signed up for.
Well, I hope you're happy with it.
Okay, well, there is one big plus. There is a teacher that is voiced by Koga Aoi.
Oh, okay. So can you make her the idol master then?
No, she's a teacher. She's the teacher for these these
But
idols that are
why
attending the
can't you
school.
tell them, hey, fuck these idols. These idols suck. I'd rather have make you my idol instead because you seem a lot better than them.
That's exactly what I want to say, but nope. It's all about raising the idol.
Okay,
I
all
just
right.
keep hearing Gomen site all the time. It's like, sorry, I screwed up. Like, okay, I have enough of this game.
Well, are you gonna keep on playing it, or are you gonna install it?
No, I'm not gonna play it.
You're not gonna.
That's my share of mobile game story for the day.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we should have that as a reoccurring call up. It's like a campfire. All right. Tell us your mobile game sins. What fucking mobile game did you try out?
But look at that screenshot I sent you, Josh. Look at that first option.
This is silly. That's what I'm thinking. What's the fucking okay? So this screenshot is like it has different ratings. It has different dialogue options. Some of these different dialogues has a green heart icon with -4. Is that like your stamina?
A green heart is like stamina. How many actions you could take
There's
in a
stamina
day?
for your dialogue options in this game.
Yeah, it's like how much action you could take in a day, and then okay, so the red one is like singing, blue is dancing, and I forget what the yellow one
The
is.
yellow one takes off the most.
Yellow one, I think it's like their like tone
Hobbies
or something. I don't know. It's like when you're like doing like their performance, like their midterms. It's like all these stats are like kind of like adds up to evaluate how you did. It was like
okay, we can't do this anymore. We're gonna talk about this for another hour, and it's gonna be unbearable. And it's like, all right, we can't do this. Can't do this.
I'm sorry for going on a tangent, but this is what happens when you talk about mobile games.
Our Gakuin Idol Master check-in, along with our Wuthering Waves check-in, our vibe
Well,
check.
if anyone's still listening at this point, they're clearly in for the long run, so it's okay at this point.
Ay.
But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. All the news stories that we talked about can be found on rpgsite.net, including the Crow Country feature that was put up by Junior. As well as, was there any new reviews this week? I guess there weren't. But you can go ahead and check out the Mikatan Musashi and the Soul Covenant reviews that Josh and James put up in the last couple of weeks. You can find
So the Megaton Musashi Wired review, I don't know if I should be honored or not. Maybe I should be. I should maybe be thanking people, but like my friend, I won't disclose their identity. My friend's like, my friend is part of a Discord community. It's like a Discord furry channel, and then they were sharing my Megaton Musashi Wired review in there. To like maybe some of them were interested or not. I'll just say thank you, furry community, for checking in on my review for Megaton Musashi Wired and making your own decision on whether you want.
Oh wow, level 5 should be very happy that community is taking interest in them, as we all know. Like suspiciously wealthy furries. Maybe that's the ticket.
Maybe that's the way we get there. To finally get level 5 back on the map.
To hear the phrase "suspiciously wealthy furries" when we started this.
They are though. You're totally right. Like look, some artists actually just like start drawing furry fan art because like the people who commission it are actually pretty wealthy. That's the word on the street that I hear.
Gotcha. You can find RPG Site on all the social media networks, platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Search for RPG Site. You should be able to find us. Join our Discord at discord.gg/RPG Site or hit the link at the top of the homepage. If you've liked our podcast, give us a rating, a thumbs up, a comment on whatever service you listen to us. We like to see those. And we will be back next week with the unexpected double feature of Thousand Year Door and Wuthering Waves, apparently. And
is that
some other
this week?
surprises.
What
Next
date?
week.
What? Oh.
Thanks,
Am I
Josh.
too out?
I will be the sacrifice. I'll take the hit. I'll download that fucking game and be like, this is the Genshin killer everyone's been waiting for finally.
I'm waiting for the Tokimeki Memorial Killer, okay, please?
That's already killed. There's no new Tokimeki memorials out, so it's been effectively been killed. So there's a lot of killers. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe and take care. Talk to you later.